Welcome to the Nature's Image Farm podcast. We're glad you're here. I'm Greg.
And I'm Susan. And together we're raising 7 kids on the farm and learning life lessons along the way.
So pull up a chair, rest your heels, and let's talk all things bees, homesteading, and the old-time ways.
Let's get after it.
If you're interested in nukes, packages, queens, or supplies, visit us on the web at naturesimagefarm.com.
Well, hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Nature's Image Farm podcast and another Stream Team Beekeeping Chat with our buddies Bruce Jenne from Bruce's Bees, Brian Koper at Castle Hives, and I'm Greg at Nature's Image Farm. We're glad you could take a little time to hang out and talk about bees tonight. Fellas, how are things going in your neck of the woods? Bruce, what's going on down in Dothan, Alabama?
Man, it's been really busy. We've had our flow in full force for the last probably 3 to 4 weeks, and it's starting to probably taper off for us. We had very little of a spring flow, so the harvest is not going to be what I had hoped, but it's still going. We salvaged some. I think we're going to be harvesting next weekend actually, and a few of the viewers are actually going to come over and help with that, so it should be fun. And one thing that I think is pretty cool is I want to show this right here, share it real quick. Greg, this is one of your queens and one of Ricky's horizontal hives.
Oh, cool.
Can you guys share that real quick?
Let's see.
I don't know how to do that. Or can I?
How do we do that, Brian?
There it is. I'm going to try to make it big here.
How do you put that? There it is. Nice.
So here we go. This right here is one of Ricky's. And if you go back and watch my channel, I've actually got a video coming out on this in the next couple of days, but wow. This hive went through winter. I was real worried about it, and we've talked about it on the chat before. It looked like 3 frames of bees when you opened it up, maybe 4, but it really was more like 2 frames of bees all winter. And I was worried about them surviving. It's one of Greg's Pepto Pink queens, and you see what it's done in the last couple of months. Really just probably 8 to 10 frames of brood, 6 to 8 minimum, maybe 10 frames of brood. And then you got pollen mixed in. You got honey down in this area here towards this end. I filled it up with foundation and some comb in there. This was 5 days later after I went through it, after I put the frames in there. You can see they're pretty much covering up most of the frames. I also want to show you real quick, guys, if I could figure I could get out of here. Here's a queen. I found the queen the other day. I was going through there. If I can get it pulled over here because I'm bad at this. Getting better though. But here she is. If you can see her there in the middle, I'm not sure how to make it bigger, but she is kind of ragged looking, Greg. She's been working real hard. Her wings are a little bit frayed, but man, she has been, you can see kind of the brood pattern here. They've obviously hatched out on this frame most. I guess she was here laying, but you see the workers attending to her, and she has been an absolute trooper. So I do want to discuss maybe later on tonight, Greg, after we cover the initial topic, maybe some ideas of using her for breeding. You can take me out of there, Brian, if you want to. I don't know if I can do it or not. There we go. But that's kind of what's going on. I've got actually have some queens coming in.
I clicked the wrong button.
Oh, Brian, that's not very nice. That just wasn't very nice, Brian. Brian did one of these. I wonder what this button does. Doop. Oh. What, Brian? You did it again, Brian. Stop it. Okay, Brian. Brian, enough of the shenanigans.
Who kicked me out? Did I kick myself out, or did Brian kick me out?
No, it's Brian. Brian went, I wonder what this button does, and went boop, boop. I can't take these guys anywhere. Guys, people aren't here to see us be goofballs and our shenanigans. They are here to see your puppy dog, though.
Right. I was trying to remove
he's getting big.
The picture, and it kicked both of you. I ain't gonna click no more buttons.
Anyway, so real quick to finish up on what's going on down here. I have Corey's queens. I checked on them. I've moved 3 of them to a different spot, and they're I think they're doing okay. They're just pretty young still. One of them that had a defect, I actually have placed another frame from one of his queens in there, and they made a new queen. She's beautiful. So we'll see how they do. And I've got a few queens also coming out of Texas. I'm going to restock some stuff this weekend. And then Greg, I still got you on mind, maybe later if we can come up with something, but later in the year if you got some available. So I'm really kind of I'm not planning on doing pollination this coming year. So it's really opened up some opportunities to try some different things because I can break the hives down a little bit. They don't have to all be big and strong all the time. And so I'm going to try maybe some queen ring type stuff, maybe do some things and maybe get some genetics that I really like down here, combine some things. And who knows, maybe we'll have some queens coming in the future in the next year or two, hopefully. But that's kind of where I'm at right now. We'll be harvesting honey, like I say, next weekend, the 16th and 17th. And then we'll see where things go from there. But how about you guys? Brian, how are you doing, man?
Good. I was just down at Mr. Burns's place.
So yeah, it was good seeing you. Good having you back at the learning yard, Brian.
Yeah. Greg put me on the spot, and I show up there, and there's 2, stools sitting up in front of everybody, and he's like, "Oh, here, come on and sit up here. You're going to talk some." And I'm like, "What?" So, but yeah, I mean, he had a awesome learning yard, so every chair was filled.
Susie, you want to come say hi? She said no. She's gone. She's been here wax tipping boxes all day. She's checking out. Brian, it was good having you out here at the learning yard. Yeah. It's always fun, this learning yard opportunities. It has nothing to do with me. It's not about how good or bad of a beekeeper Greg is or doing everything Greg's way. It's a way that we can all share and collaborate our beekeeping experiences, and it's fun to be able to bring somebody else in and just go around the room and have questions and kind of get everybody caught up and squared away, and then talk about whatever's going on out there in the field, and then more importantly, take that information right out to the learning yard, apply it hands-on. It's a lot of fun. What I love the most is there's so many families and kids and moms getting in there, cracking lids, learning, working together. It's a lot of fun, and it's really rewarding for me to see folks that they'll shoot text messages throughout the week, updates. We found the queen, we marked the queen, made our first split, and here's our first honey. To me, that is just so extremely rewarding. But Brian, I always love it when you come and visit and just kind of share your touch on beekeeping. How's things going in your bee world, Brian?
Good. I mean, busy. I went over to do an inventory of supplies, and I found myself in need of a couple boxes. So I got to take another trip down sometime, and I need like 6 more supers. So, but I mean, those will be probably for the fall flow, just because they're colonies that are building out now. But I just want to make sure I have everything. But it's good. I'm going to do something here this weekend that I've never done, and I was over at the apiary one day, and a gentleman stopped, and he lives up the street from my mom, and he looks, and he's seen the hives go from the couple that I had to now the yard is filling out some, and he's interested in getting bees. So I told him, and he was actually working, so I got his number, and I gave him a call, and I'm going to end up setting him up with one of my splits that I did, and that's building out. Now it's in one of my resource hives, so it's the 4 frame, but they've got both boxes stacked on, so they're at like 8 frames, and he was recently over. He does work that my mom actually needed done, so he cut her a pretty good deal, and I'm going to cut him a good deal. And he wasn't quite sure, like, even where to start. And I said, well, there's packages, there's nukes, and I told him what the normal pricing was. And I said, well, you patted me on the back helping my mom out, so I'll pat you on the back. But he's like brand new, so has like no clue. And I told him, I said, come on over, and we can go through, and I'll show you exactly how the colony's doing. That way he knows exactly what he's getting. So now, if he wasn't 3 minutes up the street, I would probably say, here's this person's phone number. I think I got to point this way because it's opposite on the YouTube. And I would probably steer him towards you, just because I know you with the learning yard. Now you're done with your package runs. You're going to be having folks come and pick up nukes, so he would have that perfect opportunity. And he is never, to my knowledge, he has never looked in. Oh, the puppy is down here, Eli. He is never looked in colonies. So, like, if he were to open up a box, let's say he would go over someone's place and open it up, he is totally unsure what to even look for.
Sure.
So, and I'm going to try and help him out. He, like I said, he patted me on the back with helping out my mom. So I'm going to pat him on the back and help him out and get him started. But, for those that are watching and those that maybe aren't sure and have never purchased a nuke, what would you like? I'm going to put you on the spot there, Mr. Burns.
Okay. Shoot.
If you were to say you're going to purchase a nuke, this is what you need to look for, what would you say?
Brian, you're going to get me in trouble. There's, well, I guess if we just start with, what is a nuke? Maybe just start from there, and it's a long, winding, treacherous road from there. But in short, a nuke is a nucleus colony. It's a beautiful snapshot of an existing, thriving colony that either you've made splits and you've grown a colony up with a fresh queen, and then you cherry pick and pull a nuke out of that colony. That's done that way a lot. Sometimes you'll go into a big, beautiful mother colony, and you'll split that out, and you'll take out some resources, some sealed brood and some food, and you'll take some frames and a few shakes of bees, and you'll get 2 or 3 frames started in a 5-frame box. And then if you're raising queens, you'll add a queen cell and let that queen cell go on her mating flight and come back, start laying up that box, filling it out so that everything in that box is that heritage of those bees are coming from the queen that's in the box. Sometimes folks will they will buy bees from somebody else. They'll buy, even queens from somebody else, and they'll split somebody else's bees out and add somebody else's queens. It's still a nuke. It's still a nucleus colony. It's still a snapshot of a healthy hive. But all these different nukes are all kind of ready at different times of the year. If you're in Ohio and you're buying a nuke in March or April, you're either buying an overwintered nuke, which is hardly any of the bees that are in the box actually overwintered, but the queen did. So for some folks, there's value to that. For some folks, that might be more of a liability. So you can have an overwintered nuke. You can also have nukes that were raised in Georgia, and it could be a fresh queen from this year, but raised down south, a couple months in advance, and then when they're ready, brought up to Ohio and sold to folks. That happens quite often too. For us, what we do, for what we're doing, we work with nature rather than against it. Our farm's name is Nature's Image Farm. So when it comes to raising our bees and our queens, all we can do is really get in line with nature and follow the ups and the downs and the peaks and the valleys. For us and for our management and our goals and our market, we're splitting out our overwintered colonies to make all of those queenless nuke colonies. And then when we are rearing our own queens, when those are going on their mating flights and they come back, we can either add a mated queen from one of our boxes to those nukes, or we can make those nukes up ahead of time, get them queenless, and then drop a queen cell that we've grafted. Either way, we're making queens from our stock, from our bees, using our bees to make the bulk of what's inside of a nuke. But that's the slow way. It takes a lot longer to do that. And then you're also at the mercy of Mother Nature. Spring started very early this year. And we had gotten some early rounds of grafts right off, and everything was great. Got them mated and everything was great. And then when we started actually ramping up to get to where we were going to have our queens for our nukes, at the time we had, 350, 375 queens that we had grafted, and everything was out and ready to go. And then we had that cold snap. And that's a big deal. That's a big problem when you have queens that are supposed to go on their mating flights, and in that window of time, it's rainy or it's cold, so we had issues where we didn't have queens coming back, or I just didn't like the way the queens looked, and just nearly every single one of them got pinched and we had to start over. We had another set where we're, at that same time, we're on at least a weekly schedule of grafting, and then cells going into the incubator, going from the incubator out to mating nukes for all the different purposes. And at the time where we had queens out to mate, we also had cells in several incubators, and we had some cold nights. It got down to 28. It was 50s and 60s, 70s, and then we had lows in the 28s, just like that. You take beautiful aged larva and you graft it and you put that into a cell builder, and then it gets cold. At some point, those bees have to retreat off of that open brood. They just have to stay warm, and that's what they did. And so our grafting takes just, it went right through the toilet. So what can we do? That's part of working with nature here in Ohio. We got past that cold spell, and now it's been nonstop. The trouble with that is now you're spending so much time trying to catch up, because everything was moving so good. We were on track to have our earliest nukes ever, and that would have been that late May. They were going to be perfect. They were going to be beautiful. But now you have queens that it's too cool or rainy to get mated, or you lose a bunch of cells in the starter. You're just, all you can do is keep going. From the time that you decide that today is grafting day, you're really looking about a 35 to 40 day window before that queen is pulled and ready for anything. So it sets you back tremendously. So we have a lot of great customers who understand and they appreciate our approach and the quality that we're trying to bring to the table with our bees, and they get it. We try to keep everybody updated, and a lot of this is like we're watching, we're waiting, they're building, and then we get a green light and we just try to move. When folks are buying nukes for the very first time, a lot of folks don't know what that entails. They have no idea how nukes are made. They just know they want bees, they want them in a box, and they want to have their experience. And I totally get that, and I appreciate that. But when you buy a nuke of bees that are made and crafted here locally, in your local area, it's not like going to Lowe's and buying that new smoker and you want it, you go buy it, you go get it, you take it home right then and there, you set it up and you get going. There's a lot of nuance when it comes to working with livestock, especially bees, especially this time of year. So, what is a nuke? For us, when we build our nukes, we've learned this from a lot of the great beekeepers out there. We've had the honor of working with so many great ones. But for us, when we're building our nukes, we're talking about having 5 frames, typically right down the center, we're going to have open brood with the queen. On either side of that open brood frame, we're going to have sealed brood. And then the outside 2 frames are going to be combinations. It's going to be pollen and food, pretty heavy pollen and food, at least on one of those frames. There's always going to be some honey and some pollen in and around most of that brood. And then on that last outside wall frame is a frame for them to grow on. It's not a blank frame with nothing on it, but they're drawing it out. It gives them a little bit of a place and a little bit of a space to kind of get out and spread out a little bit, keep that nuke box ventilated. Today, we had a gentleman, Randy Hahn from Iowa City, came and picked up some nukes, and he's headed all the way back to Iowa City. And so you also have to know how to build and put these nukes together, because how I would build a nuke for somebody here locally is going to look a lot different than nukes that are going to get put on a truck and they're going to bounce around and they're going to be 2 or 3 days in transit. You got to be really careful. You have to know what the bees will do. You have to know the limitations. You have to keep them cool. You also have to be really careful when you're making nukes, not to put any open nectar in there. If you can prevent it, you really got to be careful with open nectar, especially in gesture boxes. Those boxes just kind of get rattled around, and the last thing in the world you want is a bunch of open nectar just shooting out all over the bees, coating them, and then they end up on the bottom of that gesture constantly. You get that coupled with some cold temps, or even worse, hot temps. It can be a real problem. So, putting nukes together there's a lot more to it than just going out and, oh, this frame looks good, this frame looks good, this frame, okay, boom, 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 boom. You have to kind of know who the target audience is for that box of bees and make sure you're not going to set them up for failure. And tonight, we're going to talk a lot about that. We're going to get into some tips and tricks on how to get these nukes growed out. How can we keep them moving along at a great pace to where we can have a honey crop first year? And I know that's contrary to what a lot of folks will hear and see. But that's kind of how we roll, not intentionally to be contrarians, but we found with the proper management, you can really get these bees moving forward quickly, and they really can produce. They can produce a lot of bees for you. They can also produce a lot of resources and assets like honey. And so we're going to get in tonight. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks to get these nukes growed out, get them built up, make sure they stay healthy, make sure that they don't swarm, and make sure that they actually stay alive. And that's there's a lot to it. So tonight, fellows, what I'd like to try to do is get into some of the ins and the outs of how to build these nukes up, what kind of yield we could maybe expect, and I'd like to have your guys' inputs too, whether you've had a lot of experience or little experience with nukes. You guys know bees. You know what bees do. And so I'm interested in sharing that with all our folks here too. Before we get going, there's a lot of folks in here checking in tonight. I did see Wildwoods Honeybee Farms. I got to give a shout out to our buddy Grayson. He had a great interview with our friend Bob Benny just the other night. Grayson, you did a fantastic job on that. So anytime you can get Bob Benny on there and you can just glean anything, it's definitely time well spent. So if you haven't already checked that out, make sure you go to Wildwoods Honeybee Farms and check out that interview with Bob Benny. You'll be glad you did. A lot of great folks in there tonight. James Knoll, Brian Lee. We got Lisa, Grammy's midwife, is in there. Our pal Keith Spielman, Nick Zooks. Tonight I'm on a laptop and my fingers are gunked up and I can't scroll through the comments very good. But Brian's going to help me out. Brian's going to star the comments and we're going to make sure we circle back and take care of all those. Do got to thank Brian. Thank you for the that $20 super chat, and also Matt Kirkland earlier for the super chat. Really appreciate that. It helps out a lot. And last shout out here to Randy Reed, Trails End Farm, our local Ohio beekeeper. Great to have you on here tonight. So before we get started, Bruce, what's been your experience with either buying nukes or making nukes or growing nukes? Where have you been in your journey with nukes so far?
Well, it's been my growth method of choice, and also previously, before we had our discussion about packages a few chats back, I've always just recommended nukes for some of the reasons you mentioned before. It is a full colony. It's got everything you need: the queen, the eggs, the larva, the brood, the food. It's got it all. It's got the comb, and so it gives the bees, in my opinion, a head start. And I've always just felt like to sell a nuke, it just needed to be packed out with bees. But I've kind of learned through what you just explained and some other videos I've watched. Cayman did a really good video on this, that you got to be careful it's not too packed out with bees and brood, because if you do that, it can very quickly become a swarming situation for the beekeeper. I think a lot of it has to do as well, like you mentioned, if it's a new beekeeper, you might want to give them a little bit of leeway. If it's a seasoned beekeeper that's going to know what to do, put them in a box immediately and just care for them and stay ahead of them. That's one thing as well. But typically that's my growth method of choice. Over the years, I've had a lot of nukes that when they grow up and they're totally packed out, I almost just stack a second box on there sometimes, even before putting them in a 10 frame box, because they love those 5 frame configurations. In my experience, it seems like. And so that makes it easy to split them into additional nukes in the future. Those nukes like that are comb building machines, and they're incredible. But what I've done, I haven't sold a lot of nukes. I'm hoping to get into that more as I get my genetics kind of honed in a little bit. I'm working on that right now. We've discussed that, Greg and Brian, a fair amount, and some on the chat. But I'm looking to sell more nukes in the future. What I've done in the past, though, with the ones I've sold, is I've pretty much kind of almost put them in the box for the customer. They'll bring the box to me, I put it in, and then they come pick it up. Or sometimes they've even brought the box to my house, the 10 frame box, their equipment, and I've put them in and let them sit there for a day or two and then get established, and they come and get the box. And so I haven't sold a lot of nukes where they just come and take the box and go and have to install them themselves. Had a person or two that they just said, hey, I'll pay an extra X number of dollars and I'm just take the whole box. And that's fine if they want to do that. But I try and walk them through the process, because it's critical when you purchase a nuke, or when it's that time, when it's time for it to go in a 10 frame box, which, Greg, that's when you're trying to sell them, is when they're ready typically to go in that 10 frame box. It's critical to get them home and get them in that box. because if you've got 2 solid frames of brood in there, plus the frame of, the young brood, 2 solid frames of brood is basically 4 frames of bees. If you already got 3 to 4 frames of bees, it's going to be packed out within a week. It's going to be boiling over and it's going to be almost too full. So you got to make sure you jump on it quick. But, one thing I'd like to talk about, Greg, and maybe you can go on to Brian, but one question I have, and I'll bring it up here, we can address it later if we get to it, is actually installing the nuke into a 10 frame or an 8 frame box. Kind of maybe you can run over that technique later, because there are a couple of different ways to do that as well. So that's kind of my opinion. I love nukes. I think they're great. And, I've had tremendous success splitting into nuke boxes and then selling a few nukes. And I've just had tremendous success with nukes in the past.
Brian, you've been very candid and open and transparent with your beekeeping journey.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's fair to say you got hosed when you had your nuke buying experience. I'm actually kind of thankful for that, because that kind of led you to me through you looking for packages, and then this one thing's led to another, and here we are. And now we have our own banner. Now let me look at that.
You.
See us back there.
That's amazing.
Brian, for folks who are just tuning in, they haven't heard your experience with nukes. For us to sit here and talk about how great nukes are and how to create great nukes, it's also equally important, I think, to talk about nukes that aren't. So talk to us a little bit, Brian, about what your experience has been in the past with nukes.
So mine, I purchased the nuke. It was somebody in Ohio. It was like Southern Ohio. So it was somebody that, like, nobody within the circle of individuals that I know, like, personally knew this person. I just saw nukes advertised online. I purchased a nuke. I didn't know to ask anything about how they were set up. I didn't know any of that. So when I went down, the guy was showing me his apiary, and I think it was more like he probably saw that I was like brand new and I was just like in awe of all these colonies and stuff. And when I got the thing home, I mean, probably half the box was filled. That was about it. The queen ended up, I ended up having to pull frames from other colonies just to give them brood. And the colony only lasted a couple months. That was it. And it was done. So I don't know if I was sold, a 2 or 3 year old queen that was just failing. I don't know what I was sold. So, it just, put a bad taste in my mouth for nukes. That's why since then I've always avoided it, just because I didn't want to end up in that same boat. However, if I were to purchase them again, I would definitely make sure I purchase them from somebody that I know, just because I know how they're set up and I know how they're managed. That situation, it was unfortunate just because, and I don't know if it was just a fluke thing. I have no idea, but my experience, it was, I paid out the money, went and picked up the nuke, drove, probably 3.5 hours and to get a dud. So it was bad.
That's the thing, is when you don't know the person you're working with, it's, first, let me just say, anything in the world's possible with bees. I don't care how good of a beekeeper you are. There is always there's always the possibility that something can get by you. I don't care who you are, how meticulous you are. We're all human and we can make mistakes, whether we have any idea about it or not. Something could be as simple as the last time we were in that box, we put that frame in there. As we're loading up a nuke box and we roll a queen, and you don't have any idea. I want to give folks the benefit of the doubt, maybe to a fault most of the time, that they're not intentionally out there trying to, they're not out there scamming folks with nukes and things like that. But when it gets to business, when it gets into finances, it gets tricky. Money makes everybody funny. Unfortunately, that's just the way that it is. So, who knows with your experience there. Yeah, I think one of the best things that you can do is when you're looking and shopping around, whether it's nukes or packages or queens, supplies, you name it. Try to get some feedback from other folks, some references, just have some kind of an idea, and let me be very crystal clear here. We're not perfect either, and there is no way in the world that I'm going to sit here and pretend that we are. What I can guarantee every single time is every single person that calls, that tries to email, that comes out to visit, that buys bees or supplies, we're going to give them our best every single time. Now, it doesn't mean that our best is good enough, and I understand that. When our season gets really busy, like right now, and we are literally 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. every single night for 4 weeks straight, truth be told, it's very hard to stay caught up on a lot of emails and Facebook messages and things like that. For me, one thing that I always try to have an open line of communication, no matter what, is my cell phone. And everybody who buys with us, they have my card, they've got my cell phone. And so I, at a minimum, at least try to get calls made, return calls made quick. Sometimes folks are right in the middle of a hive, they're under a swarm, they need equipment for a swarm, they need some guidance, they just need this, and so I do think it's important to take time for those folks just to make sure that they've got somebody to just bounce these things off of. On the other hand, sometimes you've got customers and who just they live in a different world, and they want things right now, and they have to have answers, and they have different expectations, and sometimes their expectations and what we have to offer, we can't meet. Hopefully we can meet in the middle, but we do the best we can. Right now, as busy as we've been, it's been very hard to make sure that everybody is reading the emails and that they're getting all the information that they need. And unfortunately, things pop up, and you'll have somebody who doesn't, and they'll make it known, and we just work through it. We try to reach out to them, make sure we get it figured out. So the fellow that sold, or I'm assuming it's a fellow, whoever the beekeeper was that sold you the nuke, let's give them the benefit of the doubt that they weren't doing anything wrong. But hey, now you have a nuke and it's not performing. What do you do? What I would say is I'm maybe to a fault. I'm a fan of collaboration, not competition. I don't care who the beekeeper is. Even if they're in my backyard selling nukes for queens, if I see somebody on Facebook or anybody else and they have a problem with the product, if I respond to that person, it's not going to be, well, you're right. That person you got it from, they're just a dirty, dirty dog. My first line of thing, like anything else, it's not just about beekeeping. It is about being a brother's keeper. And it is about that golden rule too. You got to do unto others as you'd want to have done unto you. Things happen. So my first line of defense to those folks is, hey, have you reached out to that beekeeper? Have you actually called them and gotten some guidance? 9 times out of 10, unfortunately, they're just looking to vent socially or publicly, and they haven't even called and gotten a hold of that person to even work through whatever that it might be. And you'll find most of the time, beekeepers, in general, are just some of the most salt of the earth type folks. They're not trying to do anything wrong. They want to see you do well. So if you ever have any troubles with anybody's products, just give them a call. Give them that courtesy, because if you were in that position, you'd want someone to do the same thing for you too. So Brian, in your circumstance, and that nuke fails, at some point you have to, it's a bad experience. I think I've personally had several bad nuke experiences, and I leave their names out, and then who it was and why they did it's not important. But the fact that it does happen it's just something you have to consider when you're buying livestock. One thing I like to compare this to is if you go to a sale barn and you buy a few head of cows, and you get them loaded up and you take them home and you put them out in the pasture, and they're fine for a day, and then the next day they all keel over and die. What do you do in that situation? What do you do when you buy the critters there and they die in the trailer? Well, what do you do when those critters are dying before they hit the trailer? Well, that's a different story altogether. There's a certain responsibility that we no longer have once the livestock leaves the farm. If they're clean and they're healthy, if those nukes are built correctly, even if they're light, even if sometimes they may be a little too overpopulated, for the most part, they're extremely resilient. And like Bruce mentioned earlier, a lot of times a 5-frame nuke is ready to explode within 2 weeks. They'll very quickly be outgrowing that first box. By the time that brood hatches, depending on the age of the sealed brood in that colony, they're going to be really quickly outgrowing that box. You're going to have to keep moving them up. Brian, in your experience there, what did you do when you had that poor experience with the nuke? What happened to the colony, and how did you work through that?
So it was, I believe it was my second season. So I had pinged the person, on Facebook. That's the only way that I would contact the person. And I can't recall the conversation. This has been, you're talking years ago.
Yeah.
But what I did to try and boost it was I was pulling brood frames from other colonies, and I did that like 2 or 3 times, and it just was not performing, and it just wasn't growing, and it ended up it just crashed, and it didn't even make it into the winter. So I picked it up. It was like, gosh, it was like June or so, and I had it 4 months or so, and then the colony was done. And I was just like, I spent more time feeding and dropping frames of brood in it, and I'm just like, okay, what is going on? They should be moving forward instead of me just constantly having to, drop frames in it to try and boost it up. And, so I wasn't like, I didn't have enough knowledge to really know what to do. I just was like, well, let me try and feed them. Let me try and drop frames in it. Let me do this and that. And so I really didn't know, I was clueless.
Sometimes you don't know, and you don't even know a lot of beginning beekeepers, I try to make it extremely crystal clear. One of my secret business tactics is that I want folks to be so tired of me telling them that if you have any questions at all, don't be shy. Call me, text me. I don't care what time. I'm here to help. Like that's just, for me, that's the right thing to do. So that I don't want any person, their first year or their 10th, to be embarrassed to call with a problem. I don't want them to be ashamed that they did something wrong. And if it's my fault and I did something wrong, I don't want them to feel like they can't approach me and talk about it. And so I think in a lot of situations, a lot of beginning folks, with no matter what it is, you name the hobby or even the business enterprise, they don't know to just reach out and call and try to figure it out. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes you find out quickly, that was just tuition at the School of Hard Knocks. We're going to move on from that. We're going to learn from it. We're going to do better next time. And it is what it is. But, in that situation, it's tough. But it reminds me of Catherine. Thank you for that super sticker. I just saw that pop up there. I appreciate your support. And also Lisa. Brian, if you could find hers and put her up there on the big screen there, I appreciate that a lot. Lisa says she's addicted to bee chat. So glad that we're all back and feeding her bee chat addiction. Lisa, I'll have you know that I just checked in on Hadassah, and she is laying up a storm. Matter of fact, she's laying up so fast and furious that they went from that 2-frame mating nuke. I pulled the divider out of that horizontal hive, and now that there were a 4, and my bee inspector George was just out, and I was just kind of showing him. We always like to just tinker and show her. Every beekeeper loves to just see different ways bees are kind of housed and all the little tips and tricks and things. So I was showing George these horizontals, and I was showing him that queen, and I said, hey, this queen was in a video, and she had got mated in midair, and the endophallus was stuck on her rear end, and I caught her and showed her, and that entire box now is if I'm not careful, that swarm queen is going to swarm again, because that entire box is jammed. Just 4 frames just flowing over with everything. But let's see, Michael Mooneyham says, I tried buying a queen from you, Greg, and you talked with me 20 minutes about my problem and advised me not to buy it. Great guy, great advice. Michael, I appreciate you saying that. We say it all the time. We're the worst bee salespeople, because you get once you get enough seasons under your belt, you can kind of start to expect how the calls are going to go. They're going to be swarms. We're queenless. They think the virgin's queenless. There's a this, there's a that. And a lot of times just waiting it out just a little bit longer and kind of running through folks' scenarios like, okay, hey, before you waste, good money on a queen to go put into a colony who sounds like they have a virgin, and that they'll end up just killing the queen in the cage, why not just give it a week and then call me back then? That's how we do it. A lot of folks would just, if a queen got it, ship it, boom, done. And I'm not faulting those folks for doing that either. But I think it's important to try to do the best we can for folks. So Michael, I'm glad you got the situation there all squared away there. But anyways, Lisa, she's ready. She's going to be ready to rip here soon. I got to make some time, and we'll get her caged up and shipped down to Alabama. I just hope she doesn't start talking funny. Right, Bruce?
Hey, she's not the one that talks funny.
Well, there's a lot of great folks on tonight. I see I've got so many awesome folks from Ohio. We got our pal Drop Time Chris, Trails in Randy Farms on there, John Lawler, Jason Fout. Good to see all you guys on there. Okay, now I've got to ask, because I feel like I know who this person is, but I don't know them by their YouTube name. Now, if this said individual is, if this is their, what do you call that thing when you have like a second name, like a onomatopoeia, or what do you call it, like when authors have a author's name? Not whatever. Redfish. If you're Redfish and anonymity, what's your? You got shoot me a message and tell me who Redfish is, because I got a feeling I know who you are, but I can't see your picture and I can't see who you are in the thing. Alias. That's it. See, Chris is smart. But anyway, so many great folks on here tonight. I appreciate you guys spending some time with us. What do you guys want to get? We've got a couple questions. Let's take a couple questions, and then let's jump into some of the meat and potatoes. That way we don't get lose out on all the questions here. Let's just maybe go through a couple of these queen questions real quick, and then we'll keep moving with our topic tonight: how to grow these nukes out, how to keep them healthy, how to keep them from swarming, how to keep them alive. It's a big deal. David Little asks, when are you going to start shipping queens? Great question, David. If you caught the first part of the broadcast tonight, we got absolutely humbled by Mother Nature in some cold weather, and that set us back nearly 2.5, 3 weeks. And so right now we are working through getting the nukes out, and we do have queens out in the yard being mated too. I promise you, as soon as we can have a solid timeline on those later June queens, we're going to be getting with everybody to get those scheduled. There's also going to be probably more opportunities for solstice queens in late July. We're going to talk more about solstice queens too, but if you happen to have an order in for June and you're not up to speed on solstice queens, I want you to hear us out on solstice queens. And if you want to move your order back to later on in July to make sure that the queen is a solstice queen, totally cool. If not, you're great. We're going to get your queens. But now that we're already grafting, everything that's going out now is for July, and so a lot of these queens are going to be July queens, and I think there's something special about solstice queens. We're going to talk about that a little bit more. So David, thanks for the question. We're going to be in touch real soon about those queens. Another quick question here from Ronald Koenig. Ronald asks, Greg, how can I get some of your queens? Well, right now, Ronald, we are sold out all the way through July. So the only way to get our queens right now is if you're to place an order for July or maybe August. We hope to get caught up and have extras. But right now our focus is on pre-orders, making sure everyone who ordered all the way back October, November, December, January and such, that we get their queens to them. And then if we have any extras, we're happy to start releasing those too. So I appreciate the question there. Another comment here from, or question from our pal Nick Zooks up here in the Sunbury, Ohio. Matter of fact, Nick, I was just showing somebody your honey at the shop here over on the, you guys might have seen the in remembrance photo where it was the flag and then honey from all across the United States. Nick and a lot of other folks, their honey is up there, and it's always cool to be able to show off all the different types of honey. So anyways, Nick asks, do you call out queens based on appearance alone? I've had some that just started laying a good pattern, but they're on the smaller side, planning to give them another week. Great question, Nick. What I look for is, how do I say this? Size doesn't matter as much as I think a lot of folks play that it does, because I have seen just the smallest queens that I've ever seen have some of the most beautiful brood patterns and slabs of brood, frame after frame, box after box. So while I think that there may be something to this Prometheca and her biology herself, maybe she can contain more eggs. Maybe. I don't know. What I can tell you, if I have seen some small queens that are just doing tremendous. I've also seen some big, just behemoths that look like a dragon, like a gator tail, just dragging behind there, just dragging it across the cells. That weren't just they weren't doing that good of a job. So I think more importantly is the size of the queen is, what is she doing with that abdomen? Is she laying eggs? How consistent is she? Is she facetious? Is she going back through the brood as it's hatching and laying it back up again, or is she all over the place wandering around? And so I think that's important too. So in that case, Nick, I would just keep eyeballing her. If she's laying out, great frames of brood, just let her be. Sometimes if you see something in a queen that you don't like, maybe a skinny waist or a wing that might be tattered or torn, or just there's just something about it, that's okay. Let her keep laying it up, but just mark her or mark the box in a certain way to where that queen's not leaving your place. But you can sit there and you can watch her and you can monitor, and you might just find that queen goes 2 or 3 years and just made thousands and thousands and thousands of workers and did a great job. So that, for me, that's not a reason to call a queen. For the number one reason, there's two, but the first and foremost is if that laying pattern is off at all. And I know that we've had some sketchy weather, no reservations at all. There's no more even Viking burials. I got to say, I have a little less feeling and emotion in it now. But when I see a queen that's doing like that, that's a future liability, not just for me, but for somebody else. So she gets pinched and we move right along. And then if I have a colony who's just spicy, and it's not because of skunks or possums or coons or mites or anything else, and it's just a behavioral thing, it's very rare that I even see one like that. But if it happens and I mark that box, okay, strike one, I come back, strike two, we've done a mite wash, they're clean, they're doing a good job. I don't even waste the time finding a beekeeper who likes mean bees. I just, boom, she's gone. So, and for me, that's what I'm calling for. But so anyways, great questions. And I want to thank Mr. ECP himself, the prospector. Thanks for that super chat. You're awesome. Guys, when we start talking about nukes, when you bring your nuke home, what are some things that we can do to make sure that nuke is not only housed appropriately, but what can we do to get those nukes off to a good start? Bruce, as you make nukes and splits and things like that, or if you've sold nukes to folks, what is some guidance that you've given them to get those nukes off to a good start, getting them into their new equipment?
Well, typically, it never hurts to put some food on them, just to let them have some thin syrup or some 1-to-1 sugar water on there, some syrup to help them, just kind of stimulate them a little bit. Even in a flow, it doesn't hurt to do that. They may not need it or may not take the food, but that's one thing I would say. I go ahead and, there are couple of different ways you can introduce nukes into boxes, and it's controversial. There are no absolutes. I think probably the safest way to do it is to just put the nuke right in the middle and put the, new frames of foundation. If you're a new beekeeper, on the outside, fill up the box that way. But during certain times of the year, like during a flow, for example, you can even checkerboard them in there, and within a week or two, it seems like they have that thing filled out. That's how I've done a lot of it in the past during a flow. If you're dropping in an early nuke before there's a really heavy flow, then definitely you need to drop them in the middle. But I don't know what you guys think about that. But I typically, if there's any kind of flow going, I just checkerboard those jokers in, and literally within 2 weeks, the whole box is full of bees. They've got it all drawn out, and it's just going to town. And so to me, it seems almost like they fill that out faster if you do it that way during a flow. But I think just feed them, make sure they're in a good situation, and just kind of watch them. Some people will say, just don't get in them, stay out of them. But to me, it doesn't hurt to at least peek in there, every, week or so. Even if you're cracking the lid, you go even more often than that. I wouldn't go through them all the way. I'd probably wait a week to 10 days at least to go through them and see where they're at. But I don't have a lot of advice. That's just kind of what I do. Just make sure they're introduced properly, quickly. First of all, get them in the box. If the nuke is a strong nuke, get them right in there. And secondly, just monitor them and see how they're doing. Make sure the queen continues to lay with a good brood pattern after they're introduced, and just kind of watch what they do, and then monitor them and learn from the bees, and be ready to add more space when they need it. Those are kind of some of the things I would recommend to folks. I think you're muted, Greg.
I swear I've done this before, Bruce.
I know.
A lot of folks sometimes, they want exact timelines, and one of the first things that I'm trying to be really respectfully clear with is that there are no schedules. You can't just plan on coming out on the third Tuesday of every month and doing this act with the bees. You really got to be in tune to not only what nature has just done, what it's doing, what it's going to do, but you have to see how the bees are reacting to all that, and then kind of plan. And once you start to learn and read nature and read the bees, we can start giving them the equipment that they need at the right time and put them into a position where they can really be successful and prosperous. But if we jump the gun, or if we're late, we have an investment into an asset that we're not getting the kind of gains out of. And so like what you mentioned earlier, Bruce, about just, taking that nuke and putting it right in the center of a 10-frame box, checkerboarding them. For Brian, I know you only had the one nuke experience, but have you made splits before that you've then had to upsize?
Oh, yeah.
A similar situation. Talk to us about how you kind of home or house hive a split or a nuke to get them to grow.
So I've never checkerboarded. When I've done a split, I've never checkerboarded. So, and that's just my personal thing. But like my splits that I did that, oh gosh, I think I split my colonies. It's been 6 weeks ago, maybe. And I was very conservative. I didn't like get real aggressive with my splits this year. I set up the resource colonies. They're the 4-frame double nukes. So I basically just pulled 4 frames out. 2 of them were brood frames. 1 of them was a decent stores frame. And then I had slipped in a frame that they could just work on and whatever, keep them busy. I always, whenever I make those splits, they get feed. So it's just something that I always do. Make sure they have that food. I'm fortunate enough that I have, the support from Hive Alive. So I make sure that they also have a little bit of a patty as well. So if nature, basically says, well, I'm going to get cold or I'm going to rain for, several days or whatever, they have the ability to, so to say, go to the grocery store. They have what they need right there. So instead of, moving forward, and then they get that pause, they can just always move forward. Those colonies that I split, and they were with cells, they're working 8 frames. So they're to the point where it's, do I move them off and make them production colonies? Do I pull brood frames out? So in a matter of 6 weeks, it's been, I pull out frames with cells to now I've got colonies that are working 8 frames and they're just booming, but it's, my method is just, I keep the feed on them. So, but you have to have, it's more than just that, because you have to have the right, Mother Nature has to be doing the right thing. Right. They have to have, there has to be sources out there for them to forage on. They just can't, you're just not going to drop feed on them and throw a patty on them, and a colony is going to go from 3 frames to 8 in a couple weeks. So,
there is a lot of math in how a colony can actually grow. If you think about it, and if you can understand the timeline, you can kind of start to foresee the growth ahead of time. But if you take a 5-frame nuke, for instance, we're all going to build those a little bit different. But if there was a standard way of doing it, I think what is a really solid approach is, like we mentioned earlier, that center frame, the warmest part of that nuke would be the open brood, right? You've got eggs, all stages of larva. Mama's on that frame more than likely. On either side, you've got sealed broods. You've got plenty of nurse bees keeping the seams between or on either side of that open brood warm. As you move to the outside, now you start getting into storage. You have nectar and pollen and such, and you got to have a frame. You got to have at least one frame in there that they can continue to work on and start to expand. Like what Bruce mentioned earlier, what I like to do with those, with the nuke itself, is I like to just put that nuke, if it's a 10 frame box, right in the center, and add frames to the outside and give them a week. Like Brian said, you got to put the feed on there. If you're not a big fan of feeding bees, well, I don't mean anything by this, but when we're feeding our bees, we're not creating welfare bees, is what most people say. We're not doing that. What we're doing is understanding that the feed is a carbohydrate. That carbohydrate is going to stimulate the wax glands of those bees. When those wax glands are stimulated, they can draw out comb tremendously. You couple that with nukes, like right now, the next 3 weeks are so ideal for nukes to leave here, because they're leaving on a flow. When folks take these nukes home, the timing's nearly perfect, because when they go outside, we're getting into all the ground flowers and everything is just beautiful nectar flow. That's going to help stimulate the wax glands, but I still don't think that that's enough. If it was a colony that I'm not trying to grow, this is what we can do to get the maximum growth out of the colony. And for me, that's more than likely keeping a bucket feeder on top, even with a flow or not. And the reason is we need as much of that comb drawn this time of year as possible. The further we get in the year, the harder it is to get them to draw comb, which is why we use bucket feeders so much. Like right now, I think today we're at 306, 310 colonies. There's maybe one bucket feeder out there. That's it. The reason being, there's so much nectar coming in, the size that everybody is, we're okay. But if I would take any one of these splits that we just made and put them back into a box to grow out, you better believe that I've got a bucket feeder. And for me, it's Pro Sweet with the Hive Alive mixed in it, because I want the thymol, I want the seaweed, I want the nutrients. And for me, I want that little bit of a thicker syrup that's just trickle fed on top of them. For me, that just stimulates. For me, I see the queens lay better. They lay a lot further throughout the year. And they're also they're just drawing out so much wax. The secret to getting the bees to grow is getting the comb to be drawn. And how do we keep the comb being drawn? We got to keep the carbohydrates on the colonies. It's like you mentioned, Brian, there, feeding those colonies is absolutely crucial. I even take that a step further with all of our nukes right now that are going out the door. Every single one of them also have a Hive Alive pollen patty on there, because I do want them to have protein on demand on top of those nukes. And we also, like we mentioned, Brian, at the last learning yard, John Turpin from Strong Microbial stopped by and let us have a brand new product for us and our folks to trial, which is their new fondant that has the probiotics in it. That's huge. Our bees are clean. We were just inspected. Everything's great. But when those bees leave here, I want to build the most beautiful box of bees that I possibly can. So I'm on top of our mite management. I'm trying to keep them as healthy as we possibly can, keeping the brood patterns just pristine and clean, beautiful, healthy queens. But we take it one step further, because I also want to make sure that those bees that are in that box are all being inoculated, per se, that they're getting some of that gut biome helped out ahead of time with probiotics. Because what if they do go to Farmer Joe's and Farmer Joe is surrounded by who knows the possibilities and things that they could get into, pesticides, all other forms of insecticides, even herbicides, fungicides, you name it. Now, I'm not blaming big ag. I'm not saying that that's the problem. There's problems everywhere. But the fact of the matter is, we can't control where those bees go. And if they get into a situation that's going to compromise their health, that's why we're putting probiotics on now, just to help give them just a little bit of an edge. I think that's what we're doing. And what we're seeing is the bees they look great. I feel great about it. They look awesome. I know when those boxes leave here, they're going to be great. But what do we do? So, let's assume you're buying a clean, healthy, beautiful nuke. You stick it into a 10-frame box. You add, 5 extra frames to it. Within a week, you got to be back there and checking. You've got your feed on there, because they're going to start growing out. Now, what I like to do, and what Bruce mentioned earlier, which I think is an awesome idea, is checkerboarding. Once that nuke grows out wide enough, Then I like to checkerboard. I like to motivate, and I'm not sure the words incentivize them, but we talk about a brand new nuke. If you've got open brood in the center and you've got sealed brood on either side, right? Now we're going to have usually a frame they're working on and then a food frame. So what I like to do is wait until we get a couple sealed brood frames stacked up next to each other first, and then I'll take those the sealed brood frames, and I'll split those and drop a fresh foundation right between. For me, anytime that I drop a fresh frame right between brood frames, 9 times out of 10, guess what they're going to build? It's going to be brood comb. However, if they're going gung ho and they're making just a bunch of honey and they're stacking it up thick on that top band, right? And we know that entire frame is honey. That's a situation where I don't checkerboard a fresh frame. For me, I don't, because what I normally see them do is build out that honey band even wider, and they build it right into that fresh foundation, and it just makes it makes a frame sizing problem, because now we can't get the side ears of all the frames touching, and you got these weird spaces, and then one weird space leads to another weird space, and it just kind of gets out of control. So I will recommend that folks will take their nuke, put it into their 10 frame box, give it a week, 10 days, let them build out. And then the conversation rapidly goes, well, then what? When do we add the next box? Bruce, you mentioned installing in an 8 frame box. What would you do differently installing a nuke into an 8 frame box than you would installing into a 10 frame box on day one?
I don't know. I've never done it. However, I have put them into 7 frame boxes, and it's kind of like going along with what you said, Greg. I would probably drop it kind of in the middle as well. Obviously, with an 8 frame box, you'll have, you have 1 frame on the outside of one side and 2 frames on the other side. So I would probably checkerboard the side with 2 frames, maybe move the outside frame over, and have checkerboards like that. But I'd leave the brood nest together probably there. I might checkerboard them in from the outside in and leave the middle together. It seems like I found, like, one thing I like to do, and you can play with all kinds of configurations. People are so worried about just, how do I do this? Oh, you can't do that. You got to do this. But you can try different things, guys. I mean, you don't have, now if it's cold, like if it's still early spring, or if you got a cold snap coming in, keep that brood together. Don't separate it. But this time of the year, usually when you're purchasing nukes and when you've got nice, strong, healthy colonies coming into your bee yard, or you're starting up bees, it's usually in a pretty good time, or at least it's warm outside. So, you can play with that. But what I like to do, Greg, even if I do the method you're talking about, even if it's in the spring, you can put it during the middle, and then you can just rotate like 1 frame in. You know what I mean? If the outside frames, just move the outside frames out and move 1 frame in. So you kind of build it out that way. You can keep the brood nest in the middle kind of together that way. But it's like you said, bees hate to have space in between, especially in between brood. And so, like you said, man, you drop a frame of foundation. If they're stimulated and they're creating wax at all, they can't stand that. They want to have that stuff drawn out. If you drop an empty frame in the middle of a colony right between brood and they don't build it out, and there's nothing coming in, because they close that gap. They'll close that gap almost overnight sometimes during a flow, because they just cannot stand it. And so that's one thing but I don't know if I do it really different with an 8 frame. You can't obviously checkerboard 5 frames in and exactly even all the way across. You can't drop a frame of bees and then a foundation and go in that way. But I would probably kind of put maybe middle 3 frames or so right together, and then kind of checkerboard it in like that from the outside in. Keeping in mind what you said about the honey, I hadn't really thought too much about that, but that is very true. I think if the honey is capped, it's not as big of a deal as if it's not capped, in my opinion. If it's open honey up there, if you got that honey ring that's just nectar and they haven't capped it, they'll draw that all the way out. They'll draw that out until it hits something else almost.
Right. Yep.
But if it's capped, if it's already at a certain size and capped, typically they don't seem to do that as much. That's why, same thing when you're introducing honey, medium frames, same type deal. If you drop medium frames in between, frames of, if you checkerboard it in up there, it's just foundation in a honey box, and they've got, say for example, you want to add a box and you take 5 frames of not fully capped honey and you move it up and you checkerboard everything in, they'll make those so fat with honey and that they will barely even draw out the foundation. So you got to keep in mind that can become a problem if you don't, if you do that. You got these big old huge fat frames of honey and then just barely drawn out frames, beside them. And so that was a really good point, Greg, that you made. But what would you do anything different with the 8 frame box, do you think?
You know, I don't think so. The time frame that you'd want to get in there and manipulate is going to be a little bit quicker. But what I like about eights, you almost, if there was a size configuration where it's a set it and forget it, and I got to be careful saying that, but eights are nice because they just pop to the outside on their own without having to bring those frames in, and then you're
That's
just
true.
stacking the next box up. So I kind of like that on 10 frames. No matter what it is, I'm always constantly taking
Yep,
from the
having to,
outside, bringing. We're always dancing, but I also kind of like that because one of the things I like about working a 10 frame box, especially on 4-ways, is I can sit on my box next to that and I can just pop that first outside wall frame off, set it in front of me right against the box, and I can start getting in there, and I've got room to work. I can get in there. I can get the whole picture. But when I crack a lid and that outside frame is solid and jammed on a 10 frame box, well, I know I'm late and it's time. I should have had a box on there a little bit sooner. I think no matter if it's an 8 frame or a 10 frame box, I think folks might consider that the 70 to 80% rule is when the current box is 70 to 80% full. Let's go ahead and think about putting that next box on top. And I don't, for me, it doesn't matter if it's a 5, an 8, or a 10. It's about the same. Brian, what about you? Would you do anything different on 8s than you would 10s?
I tried to always stay with 8 frame equipment my first few years just because of the weight. But today, when I went over and was doing inventory of what I needed, out of, I think, 18 colonies, I only have 3 that are 8 frame. And I'm like, how the heck did this happen? 8 frames for me, I found that you have to pay attention to them just a hair closer. Not that much, but if you have a really strong colony, you better watch that one a little bit closer, just because, you figure if you have, now me, I run double deeps. So you've got 20 frames there in your 10 frame boxes. In your 8 frame boxes, you only have 16. So, just those, you subtract 4 frames from a colony. And to me, that means it takes extra time to manage that colony. So, I don't know as far as like dropping frames in the center. Like I tend to not do that just because, like I've said before, I limit the amount of time I spend in my apiary. I probably could do things like that just to get some comb built out, but I tend to across the board manage all of my colonies, whether it's an 8 frame or a 10 frame. I try and manage them the same, just so that everything I do is uniform across the board.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that's where, if only I had one of those legendary Castle Hives 3D printed hives, I would have it right here in front of me and I could just break it down in a way that I think makes more sense than just me rambling.
I mean, if it was, what was it, Willy Wonka, where you did that like transportation thing?
Isn't that cool? Yeah.
Yeah. I got to get you one of them.
When you look at let's talk about let's digress for just a second, because this is, I want to maybe drive this point home, why it's important. When you look at a bee yard, and let's say it's a bee yard of 3, and you've got 3 colonies in there, you're looking at that, and for a lot of times, folks are managing each individual colony like it's its own separate thing, right? That it's divided yet somehow maybe equal or not. They're trying to go through and figure out, I've got 3 different things. And when you look at that bee yard, if you try to look at it as it's one organism, and it is one. When you start to break it out and individually, each colony has its own series of boxes. Each box has its own series of frames. Each frame has its own series of different bees and drones and cells that are all doing different things for different reasons at different times. But if we recognize that we're never going to add more frames if we don't have more bees. And we can't have more frames, or we can't have more bees if we don't have more cells. We can't have more cells if we don't have more frames and foundation. All these things are intertwined in this beautiful dance constantly, where the name of the game, if we look at a beehive, we go all the way down to one cell on a piece of foundation. The name of the game is to get as many cells on a sheet of foundation drawn and to have something stored, whether it's brood or food. That's the name of the game. And if you can't do that, then that colony is not going to reach its full potential. So if we are getting there looking at all these colonies and then the individual colonies and then the boxes and then the frames, the name of the game is to get as many frames in use, in production, and moving forward for as long as you can throughout the year. And then you get to choose your own adventure on what that's going to look like going into the wintertime. It's better to have it than not need it, than need it and not have it, especially when it comes to resources and bees and brood and frames. And so for me, these little details on how and when we put a fresh foundation in between two sealed brood frames, or why we don't put a fresh sheet of foundation in between uncapped honey frames. All these things are due to the tuition that we've paid at the School of Hard Beekeeping, Knox, where if we do those things, here's what happens. Here's the mess we create. Here's how the bees get set back. And eventually you're only going to hopefully leave those frames out of the box. When you pull that lid open and there's that big, beautiful, fresh drawn comb, and it's 2 boxes deep, tall, and you're thinking, how in the world did I miss a frame in the top box and a frame in the bottom box? And why is there this 40-inch beautiful sheet of... You learn why it's important, and to be as meticulous as you can with where you're putting the frames, why you're putting them, but more importantly, when you're putting those frames in there. It just keeps those colonies moving forward faster. And for me, it's just we're getting a lot higher yield off that asset. So that's why the frame management is a big deal. When you're first putting that nuke in, though, you're just putting your nuke right in the center of that box. You're going to let them just pop out just a little bit, expand. The brood nest is really what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, rather than just having sealed brood, open brood, I want 2 and 3 and 4 frames of sealed brood. Now that's where the magic starts happening. That's when we can start splitting that sealed brood frame, drop in that foundation and turn it into more brood. And then eventually we're going to have to add a second box, no matter if it's a 5 frame, an 8 frame, or a 10 frame. Unless you're using one of the horizontal hives, then you're just going do. But let's say we're stacking boxes. Brian, what do you do? What's a determining factor for you on when to stack a box? And then is there anything that you do as far as orientation of the frames to keep those bees moving forward?
So I do typically exactly what you said, 70 to 80%. On my 8 frame boxes, once I look down, and if they're working 6 of the frames, then they get another box. Now, if everything is right, like right now we're in a flow, if I add a second box, a lot of times what I'll do is throw 2 brood frames up top right in the middle. That way it pulls them up. And I've had a lot of luck doing that. That way they know, hey, we got all this space up here, and then it's almost like what Bruce said too. They see those frames in the middle up top and they're just going to want to draw them out. So I've had a lot of luck doing that when I stack my boxes, but I stick to that same 70 to 80%, throw another box on.
Yep. Bruce, what about you? What do you do when it's time to add a second box? What are you looking for? And then how do you manipulate and organize those frames to get the most out of the bees?
You're talking about a 10 frame box or 8 frame box,
Or
right?
10 frame, 8 frame, 5 frame. Talk to us, run us through what you're doing when it's time to stack a box. What does that look like when you do it?
Well, I've got different, there's different reasons for doing different things. If I'm just trying to grow bees and I want to add a second box, typically that happens a lot with my nukes. I'll put a lot of nukes. I'll double stack them first, and because it seems like they grow, just my opinion, they seem to grow pretty fast up into those double nukes. But I'll also introduce them to 10 frame boxes, as we mentioned, and I like to have the 80% coverage rule, kind of like what everybody talks about now. You know, when you look down in a box, it's just packed with bees. If I just open, all I got to do is crack the lid. I don't always pull the frames out and look at all the frames because if you open it up and you see bees 80% across that hive, you know, if there's bees covering that much, then they're going to probably blow it out. You can look and see, but you do want to have, they need to be drawn out, those frames too, I think, usually, but most of the time they will be if they're growing like that. So, but there's different reasons I want to increase the size. Number one, if it's a new nuke for the year and I want to get a honey flow off of it, I might be adding a medium box on there. I might turn it into a honey production hive. I may not go a double deep. I don't know. I'm trying different things all the time. This year I actually have quite a few single deeps I'm using to produce honey just because our flow hasn't been that good. I'm trying to maximize everything, but regardless of whether it's a medium or a deep, I put it on there when the bottom box is about 80% full. If you're trying to just, if you get it early in the season, if they explode and they blow up into that second box, you can almost make a split off of them. If you're trying to make bees, you can make a second split, almost just pull that top box off in the future or make it into a couple more nukes. There's so many things you can do with it, but that's kind of how I manage it. And I usually, whether it's a nuke or whether it's a 10 frame box, especially if it's a double deep, I'll pull 1 to 2 frames up from the bottom box. That gets the bees up there working it. At least 1 to 2 frames of bees with brood up there. And if I got some drawn comb, I really like to add drawn comb back in there if I can to help if I'm trying to stimulate those bees to grow. If you don't have it, then you just got to build it. And I know Brian Lee's on here. That's what he's working on right now, is trying to build that drawn comb. If you're a new beekeeper, you got to do that first. But what I do, and this is kind of going into the next level when you're trying to produce honey, whatever configuration you use for the first couple of boxes, I like to get them up in my supers. And this year I tried just putting the excluder on with drawn comb over them, and it didn't work in all of them. What I tend to do is put the comb on, let the bees start working it, then come back at least 2 or 3 weeks, maybe about 3 weeks before honey harvest minimum, shake the bees out, put an excluder on above where I want my brood nest to be. And then the bees have been working, they go right up through that excluder. And I usually try to have an upper entrance if I can of some type as well. So if you want to make honey, that seems to work well for me. That we're kind of getting into a different topic here, but I know a lot of people call queen excluders honey excluders. It depends on how you use them, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, but that's just some different things. I don't know if that helped answer your question really, but I'm always looking. I've got some that the brood nest is a deep and a medium. Most of, in the past, my favorite brood size has been a double deep. And then even during the production time, sometimes they'll pack honey in that second deep. I can pull a few frames out of there if I want to give the brood nest some space and also to get a little more honey. But that's just something you got to manage. New beekeepers, it's a little bit tricky to try and figure all that out. So I like the 80% coverage rule. And then just kind of got a second box on. And in the first season, you can get honey if you want. But if you just want to make bees and build your hive up, typically a strong nuke of bees will easily turn into a double deep in a season, I believe. Especially if you get them in there like in the springtime, sometime early summer, you can get them absolutely into 2 deeps, I think, if you want to overwinter them that way. But so many ways to do it, man. There's so many things to do, so many different methods.
Icy Mountain Honey, thank you for that super chat. We really appreciate that. Bruce, thank you for your super chat. # Be the Lighthouse. And Breezy Hollow Bees, thanks for your $10 super chat. Breezy Hollow Bees writes, 4-frame medium double nuke stacked 2 or 3 high for winter. Started single high for mating nukes. Palmer knows what he's doing. Yeah, I think we all are big fans of Michael Palmer and the guys that are they practice what they preach, and they're doing a lot of neat things with bees and sharing that. That's pretty cool. So Breezy Hollow, thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to get to a couple questions here. Bruce, what were you going to say?
Yeah, I had a question. I've never really utilized the Michael Palmer method. I know it is a way to grow your hives up and overwinter them. Have you utilized that method, Greg? And if you do, could you kind of briefly explain exactly what it is?
No, I really haven't. What I've some of what I've done was it didn't work for me, but there was probably something that I did wrong. When I was stacking smaller nukes together, stacking them on top finding was that the cold air sunk. And when we're stacking nuke on top of nuke on top of nuke, the way that I did it, which was probably where the issue was, but if you just literally stack the boxes with their bottom boards and tops, and you just start stacking them on top of themselves, what I found is cold air sinks, and the space between the bees ended up being sheets of ice. And then everything below the sheets of ice, the bees died. So everything on top was okay. But if we take how do I explain that? If we take a let's say just a 5-frame nuke here, and its bottom board is on top of another 5-frame lid, and then this is its bottom, and then you go either if it's just 2 or you go 3 high. Right here is the problem. Is when the cold air sinks from the top box, the hot air rises in the bottom box, and this comes together here. It ends up creating ice. A big ice dams is what it did. And then everything below the ice, because cold air sinks, they were just frozen piles of gick.
Doesn't Michael Palmer, though, doesn't he take them and put like 2 4-frame nukes right next to each other? And over
on top of a colony, right?
Oh, it's on top of a colony? Okay,
you're right. This was years back, and a lot of the photos and things that we were seeing coming out on that, I think were maybe different than how it was described or how I understood it. So if you're looking at a great way to stack nukes and kill them, it's be how I just said. Don't do that.
Okay.
I think if you start getting into what I did do was take some 3-framers side by side over an excluder over an 8-frame box. And I think there's opportunities there too, which I think that's when you get into the 4-frame and the 4-frame on top of a 10-frame and thus and such.
Okay.
For me, what I mean this respectfully, I'm now getting to the point where I absolutely, Jason Crook from Bohemia, he said it first, so I'm going to blame Jason for sparking the idea. But like Jason, Jason loathes 8-frame equipment unless you have all 8-frame equipment. I'm kind of there too, but I am getting to the point to where I absolutely loathe all non-standard equipment because there is just it's getting to the point where it's driving me crazy. I've got boxes here, you know, they're beautiful boxes. They're boxes that we cut the tree, we put them on the sawmill, we put the rabbit joints on, we planed everything, we put them together. The kids painted them. They're beautiful boxes because of the history of the box. The box themselves are pieces of junk. They just don't hold up like the other boxes that we work with and that we wax dip and all those now. They got us by. The price was right. They're beautifully painted by the kids, and I'll end up moving them in here into the shop somewhere and turn them into some kind of bee art. But I'm getting tired of having 5-frame mediums and 5-frame deeps and 3-frame mediums and 8-frame mediums and 8-frame deeps and then 10-frame deeps and then 3-way deeps and then 3-way 8s and then 2-way 5. Enough. I'm done. Like I just want to put it on a pile and burn it, and just start with and just keep everything consistent. I'm really liking where we're heading with our equipment. It's all going to get. It's always a progression, but what it absolutely just it infuriates. I'm infuriated at myself most of the time when I'm working through a yard, right? And it's I've got this and I've got that, and you're at a standstill because you got this weird goofy stuff that doesn't belong, doesn't go, is a one-trick pony. That's not for me. It was fun. I learned a lot about bees and what they can and can't do, what I can get by with. And so for that, it was valuable. But now it's time for me to move on past a lot of that and standardize a lot of what we're working with. So when we're talking about moving and growing one box up to the next box, Bruce, I think before you were getting into the supers there, when we're talking about that second box scenario, Brian mentioned it. And Brian, I like what you said about there is you kind of are building, you know, after you set your nuke into that first bottom box and it grows out, and now your 80% rule, like you mentioned, Brian, you start to add your second box on there. You know, now you're building a brood bridge up the center, so that box can now move up easily, up and down, and then they can both go out, right? So you take a box like this, they need some more room. You had that box, but now you're taking that brood and going up, and you're giving them room out here. So now the brood can stay warm right in the center of that colony. They can start to put the honey and the resources out. I do like that, and I think that works out really well. And if you can make the time to manage that, you can have some really neat and tidy boxes where you have the brood where you want it, you got the honey where you want it. It also gives you a better idea of right now is a hard time of year because if you're not on point with your frame management and manipulations, you have honey everywhere. You have honey where it shouldn't be. You have pollen where it shouldn't be, which means you have eggs and larvae where it shouldn't be, because the honey and the pollen is where it shouldn't be, and mama can't lay where she should. And that is a compounding problem that just gets out of control quick. But if you're on point and you're in there and you're moving the frames, I always recommend for folks in those situations, whether it's a nuke or it's a split or it's just your colony, is let's get that honey up. Let's keep that brood pretty much in that bottom box until you're ready to bring it up and have that brood go right up the center in 2 boxes, and then let them go honey out. And what we typically see, for the most part, is when the bees get into that second box, they can have the first one for brood. When we get up into that second box is kind of a shared box where there is a lot of brood, but usually there's a honey arch over top of most of that brood. And if we play our cards right, we can let those bees flirt with, when we put a super on, a medium box on top, we can let them flirt with those frames, start to draw it out. And before mama decides to get up in there, we can put an excluder on, and now we actually have something. Now we can let them have those 2 bottom boxes full of brood if they want. Let's get that honey up above that excluder. But like Bruce mentioned, if we put the excluder on too soon, they don't do anything. And it's kind of a big problem. So, Brian, so I like the brood bridge there. I think that makes a lot of sense. I also want to throw something else out there. And Bruce, this ties into what you were talking about a little earlier. Is I think Roy Adams is, if he's still on there. Hey, Roy, good to see you. Roy is awesome because Roy was he's one of our newbies through Hives for Heroes, and he's just a go-getter. He just makes it happen. And so last year he got some bees installed, and he installed them in 5-frame equipment. My buddy Chad Holboy, he may be on here listening, did the same thing. When you install nukes and you just put them into a 5-frame, like let's say you come here and you buy your box, it's going to go home in a gesture box. You're going to take it out. You're going to take it out of there, and you're going to put it into your 5-frame box, right? In this scenario, what I love is then go ahead and just put that second box on top nearly right away, because there's no room. So you go ahead and put that second box on there. You put your bucket feeder on top. Those rascals draw out that 5-frame box above there so fast. They start moving resources up so quick. She's up there laying the second there is a deep enough cell in that second box. And here's what I love to do. Now, this is not for the risk adverse, okay? This is risky, but it's a lot of fun, and you can grow your bee yard quick. Buy a very high quality nuke with genetic stock that you really want to have in your yard. Install that nuke in a 5-frame deep. Nearly from day one, go ahead and add that second 5-frame right on top. Put a bucket feeder on top of there. Let them fill both boxes out. And don't touch it. Get that 2 boxes of bees to want to swarm. What? What are you talking about? Why in the world would you ever do that? Well, if you just so happen to have a Pepto Pink or a Lighthouse Queen or one of stock that you want to see those genetics moved forward, it's a risk, but you take that nuke, you put that second box on top, you let them crowd out, and you let them make you a handful of just beautiful, beautiful swarm queen cells. And now all you can do just very easily, right? You're stacked up like this. Okay, mama's moving, find where mama's at, take mama, move her right over here off to a different side of the stand, leave the other box in the original position, and give the queenless box in the original position, let them have 2 of those cells. Now you're going to have a daughter off of the mother queen, the genetics that you want, that are in 2 jamming 5-frame boxes that by the time that you do that are both probably each going to need their next box. Let those 2 rascals kind of grow up, and now you get to pick and choose your adventure. Do we want to keep doing this? Do we want to keep tempting this swarm thing? Or is it time to move them into bigger equipment? Or is it time just to keep adding 5-frame boxes up? But there's no reason why you can't take a beautiful nuke with a beautiful queen and the genetics that you want and let them make you a couple extra queens. No reason you can't do it. And let's say, okay, I don't want to make the split. I don't want to do that. First year queens are much harder to get to swarm. I don't care what it is. They are just harder to get to swarm, especially a fresh queen that's in a nuke. All right. So it might take you a little while for her to do that. But it's a fun way to let them do all the work. and all you're doing is stacking up. You got 2 boxes stacked, and you just unstack them, separate them, 2 separate colonies, leave a queen cell in the queenless colony, leave them in the original position, let mama back on the other side, the other colony, let her just keep laying it up, keep growing. It's a fun way to make a knowing the size colony that you need for the wintertime. And as a beginning beekeeper, you probably don't know that yet. You'll hear you got to have a 70-pound or a 90-pound or a 300 bazillion pound hive colony, or it's not going to get through the winter in your area, because everyone knows the winters are just absolutely worse in your area than anywhere else in the rest of the world. So you have to do that thing that you heard, or your bees are going to probably die. Well, you're going to have to figure out what that means for you. For us, when folks are buying a nuke from us, that nuke could be in December and January and cruise right through. And people are going to say, well, that's ridiculous. There's no way. Well, yeah, when they're clean and it's a good box of bees, they 100% can. We've overwintered in smaller than that. So anyways, that was just a little side topic, Bruce, but it ties into what you were talking about. Well, what does Bruce do with that Pepto Pink Queen? How can he, what's an easy way he could keep those genetics moving forward? You know, a lot of folks, they want to get into grafting year 1, 2, or 3. And I'm just here to say grafting's awesome. And we do it every single week on a schedule. But until you need more than maybe 30 queens a week, let the bees do all the work. Make those splits. Put your time and effort and energy into the equipment, getting the splits made, and then learning that cycle of the queen cell. But Bruce, you were before we keep going here on these nukes, you were wanting to talk a little bit about your Pepto Pink Queen that you got from us and what to do next.
Yeah, I wanted to first of all recognize we got Connor Brown, I think is his name. Brian, could you put up the Brown and Daughters Honey super chat there?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, thanks.
Connor is from Israel, and he reached out to me. He emailed me a while back, and after our last live stream that we did on my channel, and he's got bees over in Israel. He's a physician over there. And
oh, wow.
So he's got a question for you here, Greg. Do you ship the plugs overseas?
I have never. We ship to Canada all the time. I can't say that I've shipped to Israel, but I don't see why we can't try.
So I could shoot you his email information. I think
Great.
I think I forwarded that email to you a couple of weeks ago, maybe.
Okay.
From him.
Excellent.
So if not, I can send it to you and you could try it and see what you think. But he's a super nice guy. Seems like he's over in Israel right now. He's a physician over there. So I thought that was kind of cool that he would check in tonight.
Yeah, thanks for doing that.
My brother is a tour guide to Israel, so someday if I go on a tour, I may try to sneak in there and visit him. Also, Nick, thanks for the super chat there, and Nick had some questions as well, but I didn't know if you wanted to go ahead and
let's go ahead and tackle some questions, and then we'll kind of finish up on how to keep these nukes growing and healthy. What to end, just to kind of recap what we've talked about so far before we digress into some other topics there. The main thing when you get your nuke, you're going to install that into your first box, whether it's an 8-frame or a 10-frame box. Put the feed to them. They need the carbohydrates so that their wax glands can be producing, so they can draw out the comb. It is that simple. Once they do that and they're drawing out the comb, they have a place to store the nectar and the honey. They have a place for mama to lay the eggs. Once that first box is 70 to 80% full, let's go ahead and start stacking that second box up there. At a minimum, you're putting a second box on with the fresh frames, and you can let them work up and work out. If you're more hands-on, once that first box is filled out, you can do what Brian talked about. And you can take your brood your sealed brood from that bottom box and kind of move it up centrally like a chimney right up the center of both boxes, and then put your extra frames on the outside. I always personally like to keep my open brood next to a sealed brood frame. For me, for the most part, unless we get into the heat of the summer, I just want to keep that brood warm. That's the future of that colony, and I want to make sure that those bees can carry it. If it's a really high populated colony, no matter what you do, they're probably going to stay warm. But just think about 70 to 80% when that box is full. Let's go ahead and start adding the next box, and then eventually you'll get to where Bruce mentioned. You're in double deeps. Now what do we do? Now it's time to start talking about a honey super and when to add that and what to do about that. And we'll cover that when we get through a little bit closer to that point of the year. And then, of course, if you're one of our local folks here, we're going to talk about that in depth here at the Learning Yard, especially when it's time to actually extract honey and pull honey and do all those kind of things. And I hope Brian will be back here and to be able to share with us his ways of doing those kind of things. And we can use Brian's most absolute favorite honey super. Now, everybody, what Brian really needs, now I'm going to whisper so only us can hear it. I think Brian needs a Flow Hive hat. I really think he could use a Flow Hive hat. I think they would really smooth him over. If you don't know what the joke is, Brian, drop a link if you can find it to that video that you did on the Learning Yard Flow Hive Super Extravaganza Honey Flow, because Brian just couldn't get that darn thing to work. And then we brought it here, stacked it up there, and sure enough, it was an awesome experience to see a Flow Hive super full of honey, the colors, the taste, how it came out. It was an awesome community event. We had a lot of fun. So Brian, drop a link so folks can learn more about your Flow Hive loathing. I think everything has a place, and why everything's not for everybody, something is definitely for somebody. And when it comes to beekeeping, the different pieces of equipment and styles and ways and whys, I think is important. Just appreciate that. While it might not be for you, it's for somebody else. And that I think it keeps things fresh. And I kind of like that. Got a couple questions here. I'm going to try to get to those before we finish up here with nukes. Let's see here. I'm trying my best here to see some of the. Okay, here we go. I need glasses to read that from here, but does that say Coturnix?
Yep, Coturnix Corner.
Coturnix, that's a quail, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Look at you, Quail Man Brian's bringing the quail crowd in.
I'm telling you what, see?
The Coturnix Corner writes, hung my first swarm trap here in South Florida. Is it too late to expect to catch a swarm? Great question. My answer is I have no idea. I don't know the first thing about Florida beekeeping other than this time of year. It's already way hotter than I can withstand. So you won't find me down there to find out. Bruce, you're on the just north of the Panhandle. If somebody was in the Panhandle area, when do swarms in your neck of the woods, the Dothan Gulf Shores area, when does swarms start to slow down there, Bruce?
It slowed way down. I did catch a swarm about, let's see, the 13th of May. I did a video on that. It was the day before Mother's Day, and I've had some bees checking out a swarm trap I put out in my backyard, but they haven't moved in as far as I know. So, but I imagine in South Florida, it's probably a little late, but you'd have to ask somebody locally there. This situation. Florida is kind of a different animal. South Florida, because it's kind of a year-round thing down there. They don't have a lot of. I don't know that in South Florida the bees really ever turn it off or shut really all the way down. I think they kind of have stuff maybe coming in all year. I'm not sure completely about how it works down there. So I don't know if they have the seasons like we have them here. There may be some people in the chat that could answer that question for him. But here in Southeast Alabama, I mean, we'll have an occasional swarm here or there, but it's not a common thing. We're pretty much past the biggest swarm season now, I believe.
Is it in Florida, and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole of discussing this, but is it in Florida that if you catch swarms, you have to requeen them?
I think theoretically, yes, but do people do that? I don't know.
Right.
Brian, you're going to get my heckles raised because if someone says I have to do anything, well, let's talk about that.
And, well, I mean, I'm
tonight.
I'm referring to Africanized.
Right. I think that's probably best practice. Yeah.
That is Yappy says in the South half for sure. Yappy, do you mean you have to requeen, or do you mean you can catch swarms down to this time of the year? Had a nice conversation with Yappy the other night, man. He's just such a cool guy. We talked for probably an hour just about some different things. But let's see. Tim Huffman is from South Florida. He says prime swarm season right now in South Florida. Bruce is correct. Lots of multiple nectar flows. Tim lives down there, I think, not far from Tampa or Tampa Bay area down there. So he is, he's definitely.
I want to go down and see. I want to go down and say hey to Tim sometime. But more importantly, I hope when I go down there and say Tim, it's because I'm dragging back just a beautiful trailer from Tropic Trailer. If I'm thinking it's the right Tim, I think Tim is now working at Tropic Trailer, and they make some of the most beautiful aluminum beds, skid steer beds, bee hauling trailers, you name it. So maybe one day I'll have an excuse to go down and see Tim and haul back the beautiful bee hauling trailer. That'd be pretty cool. Okay, so let's see here. Prime swarm season right now. The answer, see? Tim's
yeah,
man.
that's what we talked about, yeah.
All right. Let's see. Matthew Zerder, I gotta apologize because I'm on a way smaller screen, and apparently my eyes can't see that far. But Matthew Zodekary. Oh, there you go. Matthew Z. We'll call him Matthew Z. Going on our 4th day of heavy wildflower smoke here in New York. Seeing a lot less activity than normal. Anyone else having affect the bees?
Not here.
Put that question up there. I did see yesterday was where I'm at was very hazy. And what was really cool is the sunset the sun it looked like it was on fire. With just that haze that was going across there. I mean, you can't smell anything. I guess everything's relative, but we're maybe 2 hours south of Lake Erie, 2 hours and 15 minutes. So I really don't know where the wildfires are in Canada, but I can't say that it affected our bees. If you think about how would smoke, you would really have to have, I would think, a tremendous amount to where you have some severe air quality concerns for everybody else too, unless they're just somehow more in tune to that. What I can say is the lighting yesterday was absolutely horrible for beekeeping. It was terrible. I like an overcast sky, and that's why I live in Ohio. There's very few bright sunny days, but that's what I like. But the way the sun, the light was filtered with that haze. I mean, you go to pull up a frame to look for eggs, and it was just weird. It was way different, and I struggled. Today it's back to normal. Everything's fine. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, Matthew Z. I don't know if it affects the bees. I can't say. I didn't see it affect ours in any way or shape or form, but I actually did think about that. I was wondering, does this affect the bees at all? Mine didn't seem like it, but we're in East Central Ohio. I'm not sure where we're at, or he said he's in New York. So, man, if you're up like Buffalo or Erie or upstate, I mean, he's probably got way more of that. So maybe you just never know. I don't know. Good question though. Let's see here, Brian. I'm doing a miserable job of multitasking tonight. Let's see.
Here we go.
There it is. Oh, Hickory Hives. Hickory Hives has. Wait. I gotta show you this. Hold on one sec. Hickory Hives. Hope you don't care. I'm gonna brag on you for a second.
What's he grabbing?
I don't know. We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah. Oh.
When we were, when was that? When we were out at Bohemia's or Jason's place for the BBQ, Hickory Hives gave us this, and I just think that is just a super cool label. Isn't that neat?
I'm looking at mine right over there.
So whenever I see Hickory Hives, Jason, I always think of the label there. But Brian has one. Look at that. Look at that. This is like the Fred Dunn show. We're just pulling. Yeah. If only I had a coffee cup with my logo on it. What? Wow, this is like a Fred Dunn show. Look at Bruce. Bruce is rolling his eyes like these knuckleheads. This is a semi-professional beekeeping chat. Oh, look at Bruce. I mean, look at Brian. Oh my gosh. What's Bruce bringing down out of the clouds? What is it? Drum roll, please. Oh, look at that.
He's going to disconnect both of us.
That's why I like you guys. Brian's going to do one of those things like where it's like, I wonder what this button does, and go boop. Oh, Brian, stop it. You're not supposed. All right, Brian, put down the remote. Just stop. Just stop doing it. Just stop.
Oh, man.
Anyways, Hickory Hives writes, Greg, how many nukes do you recommend having as a resource for production colonies? 1 per 3 full size? I think it depends. Great question first. I think it depends on what production are you going for? Is it for bees? Is it for honey? I think there's always, when you get into the 15-20% rule and just about everything, it creates an enormous backstop. It seems get to 25% or more. I think you're potentially cutting into maybe a little bit too much. If only since Yappy's. Hey Brian, can you put me on the full screen? Because I'm not trying to rub this into Yappy, or I'm really not. I wouldn't do that to him. But if I only had a tumbler that once was Yappy's, that everybody else gets to enjoy.
Look at
that.
this.
Look at that nice Hives for Heroes tumbler. Classy, one of a kind. Save
great.
bees, save vets. The only thing it's not doing is you're not saving any cups of coffee with Yappy.
Bruce's signature on there.
Bruce,
Greg
Brian,
Burns.
Yappy. Man, look at that. Leave us some comments below. If you're watching this video later or now on the Nature's Image Farm podcast or the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat, where should the traveling Yappy mug, the brotherhood of the Yaya Yappy mug, where should this go next? What adventure should this mug? Now I gotta wonder, are you guys actually like washing this out when you guys use it, or? Oh my gosh, Bruce, what did you have in this last? Why is there cottage cheese in this thing? Why does it smell like blue cheese? Oh God, it smells like dead mouse and blue cheese. What did you eat out of that, Bruce? Hummus?
I don't know. Must have been.
Oh, we happy? Congratulations, you have a hummus mug. Well, this is too much fun. See, we don't need to be professional. Let's just goof off and just have fun. Back to the Hickory Hives question. For me, what we're doing, my strategy, my quick strategy for the entire year is come out of the winter with those configurations. All right, determine what of those configurations are going as self-starters, which ones are going for breeding stock to breed queens, which one are going for breeding stock to breed drones. Where do those drones go out in the grand scheme of queen mating of my colonies coming out of the winter? Which ones are my earmarking to make all of my splits? Which ones am I using as brood factories? Which ones are honey factories? It all depends. But ours are constantly getting split out. We're making queens off them. Yes, I have to have some in production for honey because we homeschool. We have 7 kids. We homeschool. We're in a homeschooling community. And Susie's not here, so I can say this. But I think she got a little bit tired of everyone asking her, how can you guys have all these bees and you have a YouTube channel and you guys do all this bee stuff, but you don't have any honey for sale? I think she got a little tired of hearing it because she got a little tired of hearing it. I was hearing it from her because she was tired of hearing from it. So I got a little bit tired of hearing it from her because she was tired of hearing it too. So now we try to make sure that we keep X amount of colonies just running honey. And right now, I mean, truth be told, I probably don't have there's probably not more than 30 or 40 supers out there right now. That's fine. They'll just cruise. They can do their thing. Mm-hmm. We'll spin them if we feel like it, which after we get past this nuke window, the next 3 weeks, I'm just going to be happy June's past us. But anyways, to maybe try to answer that question, for me, it's going to be different because everything is a potential nuke or is a nuke that's growing to go into its full-size colony. So rather than me give you some made-up spitball answer, I would say let's ask somebody who raises honey as their main fiduciary enterprise. Bruce, you run a bunch of you're in it for honey. Do you keep resource hives? And if so, do you have a percentage of how many resource hives you keep on hand to plug in and to use as a backstop for your honey production hives?
I really don't specifically earmark them as resource hives, but they end up being that. I break off splits every year. I usually break off a few during the year, and they can just become those resource hives. One thing I need to do a better job of is having a resource hive that's designated as a resource hive, because what I usually do is, some of these big production colonies actually will crash. I've gotten a little better at it, but every year it seems like a few of them crash. And so I use the smaller nukes that I have, or I set them on that slot. I fill in that spot with them to grow, or to fill in that, to plug in that spot. I think like Bob Benny talks about, he has nukes that's available to plug in those spots. And so That's kind of what I use them for. I don't really take queens out of those much and like replace queens that way. Historically, I've usually just ordered queens or cells or whatever. And I've got 20 queens coming from a queen breeder. They're coming tomorrow or Friday. So I'll be replacing some weak queens, hoping to prevent some loss over the next few days. And so I don't have any resource hives that I specifically designate. I have heard the number though, that some people say that you should have. I think I heard there's one of two things. Either you have 3 different types of colonies. You've got your splits, like your nukes. You've got the same number of, you've got resource hives, and you have production colonies, like a third of each. I've also, or that may have been 50 resource, have enough hives to replace your production hives if they die out. Jason from Beekeeping Bees actually has a really good method. I can't remember exactly what it was. He's mentioned it to me a couple of times about how to make sure you have enough hives coming out of winter. I think Jason, maybe you could put that in the comments here, exactly how you do that. But he, I guess his mentor taught him this technique of how you make some splits, and even, so you just kind of maintain whatever number you want to have. But to answer the question, I don't have particular resource hives. I think it is good to have that to strengthen. And I just don't call them that. I guess I've got them, but I don't call them that typically. I always make splits. I always have dead outs, and I use those dead outs or splits to replace the dead outs. And so that kind of works out for me that way. And
Ryan,
I usually end up with about 130 to 150. That's what I usually end up on. And then I drop down to around 100, 110. And then I kind of just every year kind of keep going up to that number.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how it works out for me.
At my scale, I've got the 2 resource hives. So basically I'll set up 4. It's basically 4 splits that I'll make up in there. And then I just use them more to supplement other colonies. And this year already, I've already broken down one of those completely, just because I had, with my queen issues, I just did paper combines back, and now they're literally, those colonies are booming. So there wasn't like a set ratio as far as like 1 to 4, 1 to 3 or whatever. I've just bought those 2 because at my scale, that's all I ever needed.
Right. One thing that we definitely we preach here is it's important to have a resource hive. If you have 3, this is where like talking about this at scale is different. I think anybody, if they've got 2, 3, like if you've got 3 to 4 colonies, I think you ought to have a 5 framer at all times growing out. Just because you're always going to have that backup queen, you're going to have an extra sheet of brood. You're gonna have something that you can rob with. You're gonna rob the poor to give to the rich in this condition, if that's what they need to move them to the next level. And you're just going to use those resource hives to just grow out. They're constantly moving forward, but they don't have to move at a tremendous pace. They're creating some resource that if you need them, they're there. Let's say you get into a situation, you've got a queenless colony. You're trying to figure out, is this colony queenless or not? You can go to a resource hive, pull a frame of eggs out, drop it in the colony, see if they draw cells. If they don't draw cells, hey, maybe there's just a virgin who's on a mating flight, or she's getting ready to start laying. I think it's a great way to use it as a litmus test, is have a resource colony there that's always just making a backup queen. You're going through your main colonies and you find a frame that's got a swarm cell on it. It's just capped. Don't freak out. Cool, great. Grab that frame. Drop another frame of sealed brood, a few shakes of bees, a honey frame, and a couple frames to grow out on. Drop that into a 5-frame box. Let them just grow out at their own pace. Like, there's no pressure. We don't need a yield. All we need is to have that backup queen and some extra frames to move around. Doesn't cost you anything other than the equipment for, the resource hive. But if you needed that thing in a bad way, it's huge to be able to have something like that. As you kind of get through the rest of your season, and you get through there and you're like, well, what am I going to do with this extra resource if I don't need it? Okay, great. Let's keep them clean. Let's get it to a 5-frame deep single size, maybe 2 of those. Overwinter that rascal. Why not? It doesn't cost you anything at that point. So I think it's important to have those resources. That 10 to 20% rule. I think, Brian, if you're cruising right around 20 colonies or so, and you have a couple of resource hives, I think, or you have 4, you're in that 10 to 20%, I think makes sense. Anything more than 20% is just another unit of a different size out there. So for us, we constantly have resources everywhere. If we pull a queen and drop a cell, and some reason the bird eats her, or she doesn't come back, or you name it, whatever happens, and I have a 3-frame or a 5-frame queenless colony, that's a resource hive in and of itself, because now I can take those frames over to another little box that just needs a little boost here or a little boost there, and boom, just combine them. Don't think twice. You're always moving everything forward, but it comes right back to the importance of having a frame that is drawn out, because if a frame is drawn out, it can store, and a frame that is drawn out and can store is an asset, and that asset can be used and manipulated and moved between all the different units to move the overall picture of the apiary forward. And when you think about it like that, it's not a matter of, well, this box has 4 frames and it has this queen and she's this and that, and I can't take that frame out of this one and put it here, because you just totally just get past all that, and everything just starts kind of moving forward. So Hickory Hives, great question. That just catapulted a whole train of thought. It would be a whole other episode. We're getting pretty late tonight. It's almost 10 o'clock. When to get get through a couple of these quick questions here, and we're probably going to call it a night. I think we're going to have a part 2. As folks are growing their nukes out. Okay, what do we do next? They're in doubles. Matter of fact, let's do it. Let's just call this nukes part 1, and let's get back together again and do a nukes part 2, and maybe let's wait for probably, I don't know, 3 to 4 weeks. It's that when that second box is on and it's pumping and it's full, and it's okay. Now what? Because now it's a make or break, and now we could go a bunch of different ways. So let's circle back a little bit later on in that timeline and talk about, well, what do we do next? For now, again, thanks, Nick Zooks. He's got thanks for the super chat. He's got a question here. How did you land on producing nukes versus making queens or honey production? What changes did you have to make as a beekeeper to better accommodate nukes? Well, Nick, the thing about it is early on, we sort of got the picture of what we wanted to do almost immediately. There's just get him. Cujo agrees. I mean, that's what more could we say? That's perfect timing, man. I think we're going to have to come back to that question, because there's a lot to that. There's a lot of things that got us to that point. But what I can say is that if God has a plan for us, and you believe that, and beekeeping is a part of everything that we do, you start going in certain directions and you catch no traction. It doesn't resonate with you. You don't feel like that's even for you. And then it's your heart, and you start getting pulled into a certain direction. And the closer you get to that thing, the more on fire you are for it. So what I can say is this is going to go way out there, and I could chase this thought idea along, and this is going to be high in the gods per minute. So if talk of God offends you, then you can see yourself out here. But what I wanted to bring up is if we do look to just the book Genesis, or when we look to say where man is created in God's image, if we look to who God is, and what did God do for 6 days, Bruce?
Created everything.
Right. And so if we are looking to man as created in God's image, is it no wonder why we feel such fulfillment and joy and happiness and purpose when we're creating? For me, when I am working that box of bees, and I'm creating more bees from those bees, or I'm grafting those queens from those eggs, from that larva, and we're making more bees from bees, you can't help but think about man from the miry clay, and Eve from Adam's rib, and all these different things of creating and making and being a part of all of that. I think that creation gene is in all of us inherently. So for me, creating nukes, creating bees, creating queens, creating splits is a way that it just speaks to me, it resonates, and it just makes my heart happy. Honey, just the sound of honey, just the word honey, just makes me just tune out. Like I have colonies, and they have to produce honey because we are trialing queens and making sure these genetics make honey, and they do. But honey is just not for me. That's just not where I'm at. But if you look at it from a business standpoint, first, if you can find something that you're passionate about, that you're good at, that you feel like you have a niche and an opportunity, whether it's bees, queens, nukes, or honey, that's the direction. If the door's open, you got to walk through it. For me, it's really hard to just put that in perspective and to say, which way do you go? I think each one of those is a better financial opportunity for the right person. And finding out which one of those things for you is something I think that you have to find out too. There's opportunities to sell honey at niche boutique scale at high dollar per ounce. And there's also opportunities to make boutique, high dollar, really sought after genetic queens and nukes too. You have to find what speaks to you, what resonates for you, and where you find the most joy and happiness. And you really do need that, because as your business grows and you get into those stretch years or stretch months and stretch weeks, if you don't love what you're doing, you're done. Right now, if I didn't love nukes and queens and making splits, I would be done. Because right now, the stretching and the stress and the turmoil and everything else that it takes right now, this time of year, to fulfill all of this is so much that if I didn't love it, there would be no reason to keep doing it. So just keep that in mind, Nick, as you grow and do what you do. See what resonates for you and what brings you joy and happiness. A couple questions left, and we're going to cut it off for the night. I wasn't supposed to get on my pulpit tonight, but it is what it is. We got a question here from Pennsylvania beekeeper Darren. Is a solstice queen considered a first-year queen? Bruce, what do you think about that?
I've never thought of that before. I would say yes. Depending on it. I mean, if it's this year, I would say, I don't know. I don't know. I would say, to me, first year is like the season of the bee. You can do it. There's two ways to look at it, I think. And Greg, you probably have the textbook answer for this, but first year could just mean, is the queen a year old or less? So that could go through next spring, or you could you could look at the year as winter to summer. So, when January to December, so to speak. So if it's it'll be first year until January, and then it's a second year queen. But I don't know. What do you think?
I think it's kind of like we've got our oldest is 21, Nate's 21, and the youngest, Luke and Lily, are twins, and they'll be 8. Well, when they're in that time frame of development, I'm 7 1/4, or I'm 7 1/2, or I'm almost 8, or I'll be 8 in 3 months. And you look at the window as being really short. And now that I'm 40, it's like, I don't even care. Let's stop counting. Let's roll it back. And I feel like I'm 50 or 60. I think what's different when we look at queen age and queen timing is if the queens, let's say the queen's grafted around Easter, the first part of April or so. As she hits flow, the first flow, she's already coming, she's developing, she's doing her thing. But when she is going into the wintertime, she's already a very mature queen. When she comes out of that winter, coming into the next spring, she's already, I think, peaked in prime. And so what you have are queens that are ready to swarm very early on in the year on that first flow, or before. When that first flow comes on, they're done, they're gone. What's interesting with solstice queens is when they are made, or at least mated past the end of June, then they are fresher going into the wintertime. As they come out of the spring, they are just coming into their fullness on the flow, which means that colony is just building up and is hitting that peak at the right time of a flow, rather than peaking before the flow and then swarming. They're peaking right on a flow, and they just cruise, and you can manage 2 things at once, swarming and production at the same time. So technically, they're both born the calendar year first, but we're getting into, I'm 1 1/2, no, I'm 2, or I'm 1 3/4. That little bit of nuance, I think, makes a big difference. And where I think that's important is, I'm going to name drop here. And the only reason I name drop is because it'll bring some validity to what the situation here. For years, and we still do this, we take care of our customers first. And it's not till the very end of the year are we get freed up enough to make queens for us, to get everything split out, right? We'll make splits clear up into October, and even November make splits. But those are downsizing splits. And then we're using our mated queens to then requeen all those, so we have the right size colony going into the wintertime. Well, I can remember driving late night with Bob Denny down in South Florida. Actually, it was Central Florida. And we're driving around, and Bob's asking me, well, Greg, what's your winter strategy? And we were talking, and I told him, we can get by with, single 5-frame mediums and single 5-frame deeps and all this kind of things. And he looks over and he goes, well, I bet you're making pretty late queens, aren't you? And that's exactly what we were doing. And he said, those late queens, they just do the best. So those late queens are solstice queens. It does matter. It makes a big difference. And what I have seen is the mix of the Caucasian and Carney genetics that we have here, coupled with the solstice timeline. We have queens that just aren't in a hurry to swarm early in the year. Here in Ohio, in our area, we had folks that were having swarms 3 weeks prior to us, and our bees were just, nope, we're good. They're building up, but they weren't in a hurry to swarm prematurely. And man, was that a big deal, because there were so many swarms that happened before that cold snap that who knows how they fared. Probably not real well. So there's something to be said about the genetics that maybe tone down that swarminess, if you could say that, but coupled with the time line the queens mated, I think that does help. And having those queens that are mated late in that part of the summertime it's a solar, what's the right word for that? What's the smart way to say it's how these bees behave based on the solar exposure? When they hit the winter solstice, and we start gaining minutes of sunlight, the queens, they don't stop laying in the wintertime, but they start laying more at solstice because there's more solar exposure. The same thing sort of happens in a colony when we hit the summer solstice. Now we're that day of solstice is the longest day of the year, right? And then we start losing minutes of sunlight all the way back down until we hit the winter solstice again. And then what's interesting about that is the bees have that mechanism where they know that, and they flip from, okay, it is swarm and increase mode to, okay, now it's hunker down and store and let's get ready for winter mode. And so there's something nearly magical that happens when you're requeening colonies in that time frame, especially if you do happen to get a little bit of flow. They take queens readily. It's a special time of year, I think. And so that's why it's important for us to make sure that we do that. And so anyways, I could talk all night about that, but we've already gone a little later than we probably were hoping to. But I do got to brag on Roy Adams here. Adams Outdoors, queen cells in 2 weeks doing that. Started with 2 hives last season, has 13. Thanks, Greg. Yeah, I was talking about Roy. He was just stacking those 5-frame boxes, crowding them out, cutting cells, making splits, learning a lot, learning quick. That was pretty awesome. Got to thank Jason Crook over at Bohemia Bees. Fantastic chat this evening, gentlemen. Jason, thanks for your $10 super chat there. Be sure to go check out the Bohemia Bees YouTube channel as well. And I got to thank Mr. J.W. Irwin himself for that super sticker. J.W., give me a call tomorrow. We just sent emails out tonight for nuke pickups. And if I remember right, you're picking up nukes and queens. And I want to make sure when you do that, you have time to visit. So I think we're going to need to get you on a different schedule than in the email. So JW, if you would, give me a buzz and let's get that worked out so you can plan accordingly too. Other than that, guys, I don't know if I missed anything. If I did, I'm sorry. I really enjoyed having everybody on tonight. I want to thank everyone who's been listening to the Nature's Image Farm podcast feed. If you're listening to this replay later, or if you're listening tonight with us live, we appreciate you guys. We can't and wouldn't do this without you, and you guys make this whole thing go around. So I want to say thanks for all our nuke customers and queen customers. I got to thank you for all your support. I got to thank you for your patience as we are just working with nature's timing here. Looking forward to seeing so many of you starting this weekend. We're going to have a lot of fun doing that too. Bruce and Brian, I want to thank you guys just for the continual collaboration, the friendship. We've had a lot of fun since we started this, and I think we have a good dynamic all together, and it's a lot of fun just kind of checking in all the time. Bruce, before we get going, what's coming up for the Bruce's Bees YouTube channel in the next week or so?
I've got a video coming out hopefully in the next day or two. It's almost done. I've got a couple of quick things I got to do, some adjustments and editing on the long hive with your Pepto Pink Queen in there. And I did want to talk to you about a couple of things there. We'll talk about after, but yeah, so that'll be coming out. It's really exciting what that hive has done. I really do like the horizontal hive. I've never used one before, but man, it's just so convenient to work, and it's got some good bees in there, so it's been a lot of fun, and it's still an experiment for me, but so far it looks pretty good. And that's really the only thing I have. I've also received some samples of some products. I'm just going to do a quick little review on my channel here in the next few days, and you'll see that when it comes out. It'll be good for smaller beekeepers, like hobbyist type beekeepers, and many of you on here are in that category. So I have no idea if the product's going to work or not. It's actually a couple of different variations of a similar product by the same company, but I'm just going to do a review on it. I'm not pushing it or anything. I'm just going to see how it works, and I think it'll be good. I've seen people use this particular product before. I think it'll be fine. So that's the main thing. And then we got the honey harvest coming up. I'm not sure how much of a video I'll get out of that, but we'll see. We got some folks that have been on here tonight that'll be joining me for that. And hopefully they can get some videos out of it if they want to participate as well. And I may let them do kind of like a Brian thing where he comes to your place and videotapes what you're doing. And I'm not sure. We'll just see how that goes. I don't go into that with any preconceived notion. We've made some really good videos over the past couple of years about our honey harvest, and so that'll be a fun event. So I don't have as many videos. I'm not posting as frequently. A lot of that is intentional. It's just I've been really burned out on the YouTube thing as far as just trying to post and create so much content. I'm kind of making a little turn in my beekeeping adventure. Greg, we discussed briefly, I think earlier, maybe even before we got on, that I'm not planning on doing pollination this year. Anything can change, but I'm not going to go to California this year. I've just decided that. If it's pollination, it'll be local stuff close by where I can get in my own hives and follow them. And so that has opened up all kinds of opportunities for me to try and do some things with genetics, with queens, with maybe some nukes type stuff next year. And I'm going to lean on you and some others closely to figure some of that stuff out. So it's just a different approach I'm taking. And I do enjoy the honey part of it. And so trying to figure out how to maximize that. And maybe it's all going to go hand in hand, and we can create a better bee for this area and maybe produce more honey. And so I think it's a kind of a fun, my mentality has shifted since I don't have to worry about having a bunch of super strong colonies in January. I can actually break them down, and not have to worry about trying to build them up when they really don't want to build up. So it'll be kind of a different approach this year. So that's kind of where I'm at with my whole beekeeping / YouTube operation. Frequency down a little bit on the videos. They will still be coming, but I'm not trying to stay on that 2 to 3 video a week rate. That's just a tough clip. If you want to create quality videos and edit your videos and takes a lot of time and effort and energy. It's just exhausting. And so I'm trying to kind of just, I don't know, focus on the bees right now and get really good at that. And then the videos will come if I see an opportunity, but I'm not really going to be doing a lot of, fancy, highly edited videos. I maybe do a few here or there, but it's mostly going to be, if it is, it's going to be more raw stuff. I think, like I've done a little bit lately with the big stacked hives in my backyard. If you saw that one, I just went out and shot a couple of clips. The video is about 4.5 minutes long or something. And then just, minimal editing and put it up. So that's the kind of stuff I'm going to do. And, unless a different opportunity presents itself. But I didn't mean to drag this on, but that's what the plans are for the next little while anyway.
Well, that's good to hear, and for what it's worth, we create this YouTube beast and the podcast and then the channels and all that, and it's important for us to, keep putting good quality content out there. And the fact of the matter is, when you're so busy in the business of it or the business of bees, that sometimes we have to just shoot, or this life itself, there are priorities and we have to, make those choices. I wish I could get 2 or 3 videos out a week. At this rate, I wish I could get one decently edited video out a week. Right now, I can't even get a good edited video out once a month, just because from February until now, it has been just nonstop. And I'm thankful that God's blessed us with that kind of workload. But Bruce, I know what you mean. You just, it is what it is. But that's where I think these live chats are a nice conduit, and it connects all of those things together, because no matter what, it's once a week we're here. We're doing this together. We're all trying to figure out what we're doing every single week in our beekeeping, our life, and our business. But at least we can hopefully get to the beekeeping chat and just kind of connect and be present, and then have our folks involved in things like that. But I think beekeepers understand, when it's time to add the box, to spin the honey, to make the splits, to get the cells in, that takes priority, that takes precedence. And that's just, it is what it is. So fall and winter time, I think you're going to see a lot more videos out of us as we all have more time to actually catch our breath if we can, and sit down and actually put those videos together. But enough of that. Brian, what's up on the calendar for Castle Hives the next week or so?
Oh man, it's just keeping all the colonies moving forward. I've got a video edited sitting on my computer that updates everybody on the virgin queens that I installed. And I had no even intention on filming that when I did. I filmed one video and I thought, well, I'm here, let me peek. So I look in one and I saw what I saw, and I'm like, okay.
I gotta do it.
I go to the next one, and it's just, you see this sheet, and I'm just like, well, okay. So I just, middle of the inspection, started doing a video. So I've got that. But it's just, I'm kind of getting things situated where I want. I'm over that like little rough spell, and it's just staying ahead of the flow and getting equipment where I want it. And it's just trying to be the proactive beekeeper. Mm-hmm. So yeah, but I'm gonna actually, I think I'm probably gonna talk to the gentleman that's going to get a colony from me and see if he wants to get 2. That way I decrease my numbers just a hair more, so that I can just keep focused, because it's overwhelming for me just to try and manage. When I get near 20, it's just, I don't think I can, properly do it.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, it's all good though. The colonies are moving in a positive direction. So yeah. And I'll be looking forward to, it'll probably be a couple weeks here. We'll be spinning some honey, and we'll see how they do. 'Cause I've got a heck of a lot of supers out. I've got every super that I have that's out. That's why I need to get 6 more from you my next trip down. So
awesome.
Yeah. But it's going good though. Going good.
Well, good. I'm glad to hear you guys are stacked. The bees are doing good, and you're stacking boxes, and queens are mated, and you're making honey and making bees, and finding that joy and happiness in the bee yard, and hope it keeps up, and you guys don't find too much stress and feel too stretched out and feel too thin, and just keep digging in there. If anyone's out there and they feel like, man, I'm stretched out, I'm running ragged, I'm way too thin, well, just know that there's a club and we're all in it. And I think most of us will acknowledge it, that it's grind time right now. We just have to keep getting through. I mentioned the last time, there's a pretty funny farming saying where it's, the farmers spend every week of their life always saying, we just have to get past this week and everything will be fine. That's farming, week after week after week. Specifically May and June for nukes and queens it is the most intense, chaotic time of the year. So I'm going to thank everybody for their patience and flexibility and support as we are growing our business and just doing the best we can right now. It's been a lot of fun, and I can't wait. The next learning yard coming up on the Father's Day weekend, which is the 17th, is the next learning yard. If you are a nuke customer of ours, make sure you check your email. More importantly, check your spam folder. And there you'll find updates on nuke pickup dates and times. Make sure you reply to that email and let us know what your preference for pickup is. We'll get you scheduled to pick up your nuke. Really looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. And eventually we're going to have some more videos get popped out. There's so many great interviews. I mean, just one-of-a-kind interviews from Hive Life, from the West Virginia Honey in the Hills, folks like Tom Nolan that stopped by, John Turpin that stopped by here at the shop. Just so many great things. But it's just a matter of getting time, or I'm going to have to pay an editor or somebody to actually put these together. I don't know what else to do at this point. But that's the humble, honest approach on where we're at. Is you always, feel like it's not enough. You're not doing as much as you want, or you should, you can. But all you can do is the best that you can do day in and day out, and let everything else go. That's about all you can do with it. Other than that, I really can't think of anything else. There was something else I was going to say and mention, but my brain is fried. It's probably time for dinner. It's probably time for bed first. So maybe we'll skip dinner. I just, when we get towards the end of these chats and everybody can sense that we're kind of winding it down, they start jumping off. So now that we only have like 115, 120 people on here, I'm going to ask you guys a personal question. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Two things. Number one, if we could pull it off, what would you guys think? Okay. What would you guys think if there was a live stream team field day here at Nature's Image Farm featuring Bruce Jenne, Brian Koper, and yours truly, live and in the flesh, working beehives together, a private field day right here at Nature's Image Farm? What do you think?
I'll say thumbs up.
Be pretty cool?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Nice. Okay. Let's put a pin in that. Let's come back to that one. I got some ideas, and I also have some ideas on some very unique opportunities for solstice queens that have this brand new thing that we're mixing with these other cool things all at once, but we'll keep that between us. On that note, any final thoughts, fellas? No.
I just really, last week we postponed, and I was really actually looking forward to this tonight. It's just been fun. It's been great. So I'm glad we were able to keep it rolling, man. We're just going to keep it rolling. It's been a lot of fun, and we really appreciate this community of folks that join us. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's great. Yeah.
Well, guys, again, thanks for everything. If you're listening tonight or tomorrow or the next day or whatever the time of the day that it is, the Nature's Image Farm podcast, thank you. We appreciate you guys. If you're checking out this replay later, it's so much funner live. Join us live next time. But thanks for listening back later. And if you're listening live prime time right now, you guys are awesome. Every week you guys come back, and there's more and more of you, and there's such a sense of community. The comments, the threads, everything. You guys make this whole thing awesome. I want to thank you guys for the time that you put in to hanging out with us and being a part of the Stream Team Beekeeping Chat. As always, I want to remind you to be the lighthouse and be the change you want to see in this world. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.